Chapter 3844. As the demon army with tens of millions of battleships turned around and sailed out of the rat-ruined star field, the higher-ups of the various scout fleets in the First Universe, who had been waiting outside the rat-ruined star field for the past 2 days, were stunned for a moment. Then, they heaved a sigh of relief. Sigh. In their opinion, this peace talk was clearly over. The final result was that the demon army had retreated, and its pace of dominating the First Universe was finally stopped by the Space Rat Clan. For these slave clans, this was obviously great news. This was because if the Space Mouse Clan made concessions in this peace negotiation, then only the Hell Ant Clan among the top 3 clans of the First Universe's slave clans would have the ability to stop the demon from dominating to a certain extent. If the Space Rat Clan remained neutral and did not participate in this matter, then the Hell Ant Clan had a chance to stop the demon army. However, if the Space Rat Clan and the demon army formed an alliance and participated in this expedition, then the Hell Ant Clan would be in danger. Once the Hell Ant Clan fell into the trap, the top 3 slave clans in the First Universe would combine forces, and none of the other clans in the First Universe would be able to stop the demon army from dominating. This situation was exactly what they did not want to see. For the various clans in the First Universe, they had been enslaved by the Tianji clan. Now that the Tianji clan had withdrawn from the world and moved away, they had just regained their freedom. Who would be willing to immediately become a subordinate slave of the demon army under such circumstances? Therefore, it was definitely a happy ending for the demon dwellers to be stopped in their tracks. Of course, this did not include the demon dwellers. This was not something that the other slave clans would care about. With this kind of joy, the various scout fleets that had been lying in wait outside the rat-ruined star zone for the past few days to pay close attention to the subsequent development of the situation were basically ready to return home. They had to report this great news to their respective clans as soon as possible. After all, this time, the demons suddenly sent troops to suppress the Space Rat Clan. They had an ulterior motive, which had already shocked the core higher-ups of the First Universe's servant clans to the point that they couldn't sit still. It was also at this moment that the upper echelons of a scout fleet saw an unexpected scene with sharp eyes. After being stunned for a moment, they immediately exclaimed softly, causing a wave of exclamations. Look, behind the 10 million battleships of the Devil Dwellers, there seems to be a fleet with a scale of 3 to 4 million. This is almost half of all the battleships of the Space Mouse Clan. What's the situation? Could it be that the peace talks are not over yet? But if that was the case, why did the Spatial Mouse Clan send out nearly half of their army? Do you want to continue the war with the demons? Cut the crap. Can't you see that the demons' 10 million battleships are retreating from the Rat Ruins Starfield? If they want to continue fighting, why would the Devil Dwellers retreat? Heavens, this is not a retreat. This is an expedition. The demons and the space rats have reached an agreement. The latter has been roped in and dispatched nearly half of their army to join the demons' crusade army. This is the rhythm of rushing to the next target. It's over. It's over. The demon dwellers and the space rats have joined hands. The new overlord of the First Universe is about to appear. Along with these exclamations, a huge Starry Sky battleship army with a total military strength of 14 million slowly sailed out of the rat-ruined starfield and began to assemble at the edge of the starfield. The demon dwellers' 10 million army, and the space rats' nearly 4 million battleships that follow behind. At this time, the battleships of the 2 clans gathered together to form a terrifying army, completely disintegrating the last trace of hope in the hearts of the commanders of the scout fleets of the various clans in the distant void. The demon dwellers and the space rats had joined hands. Moreover, judging from the formation of the entire army, this alliance was obviously led by the demon dwellers, while the 4 million battleships of the space rats were just following on the right side, like vassals. This was definitely a super heavy bomb, and there was no doubt that it explained a problem. That was, the demons' conquest of the First Universe's races had not been stopped. Although the Space Mouse Clan had not fallen, they had been persuaded by the demon and willingly became the vassal of the demon's conquest of the various races. There must be a deal between them. The demon dwellers had promised them benefits, but no one knew what they were. In fact, for the commanders of the scout fleets of the various clans in the first universe, this was actually not important. The important thing was that the Demon Dweller's army was about to embark on another journey. If there were no accidents, the new overlord of the first universe was basically inevitable. Even the commanders of the various clan scout fleets had basically guessed which clan the army of 14 million battleships assembled by the Demon Dwellers and the Space Rats would send troops to conquer next. Almost without much hesitation, the scout fleet from the Hell Ants turned around and left immediately, performing a space jump and disappearing directly. They would rush all the way at the fastest speed to report this shocking news back to their clans. This was because even a fool could guess that the next target of this terrifying army of the Demon Dwellers and the Space Rats would definitely be one of the top 3 clans in the first universe, the Hell Ants. In fact, it wasn't just the Hell Ant clan scout fleet. After a brief moment of shock, the commanders of the scout fleets of the other first universe's slave clans that were waiting in the distant void outside the Rat Ruins Starfield also issued orders one after another. Return to your clans immediately. Even the second space battle of the Demon Dweller's army in the Hell Ants' ancestral land, the Nether Ant Starfield, was not in the mood to investigate at this moment. There was basically no suspense in the result. In the face of the 14 million battleships of the Demon Dwellers and the Space Rats, the Hell Ants could not resist at all and would definitely be taken down in the end. The day when the top 3 clans would unite as a force was not far away. For all the other slave clans, this was tantamount to a bolt from the blue. They had to return to their clans immediately and report back the information, so that their clans could make countermeasures to deal with this matter and try to buy as much time as possible. Rumble. Boom. As the scout fleets of the various clans in the distant void retreated one after another. In the void at the edge of the Rat Ruined Starfield, the 14 million battleships that had been assembled were also activated under Grandpa Mo's order and sailed into the distance in a grandiose manner. The Starry Sky. Chapter 3845. The Hell Ant Star area was the ancestral land of the Hell Ant clan. However, this star area was also called the Nether Ant Star area because, according to legend, the bloodline of the Hell Ants originated from the Nether Ants of the Primordial Age. The Nether Ants were the same as the Void Rats. They belonged to a mysterious clan from the Primordial Age. The real Nether Ants and Void Rats had long gone extinct in the present world. According to legend, the true underworld ants were almost completely undying and indestructible. Of course, this was a relative statement, referring to the fact that conventional methods were no longer able to threaten their existence. However, all living things in the world had their natural enemies. Since the Nether Ants had already vanished without a trace in the current world and were suspected to have gone extinct long ago, then, during the Primordial Era, there were surely living beings that were their natural enemies. It was a creature said to have lived in the legendary Nether Prison. Its whole body was covered in black flames. The Nether Ants were most famous for their shell, which was called the Nether Armor. Every inch of the surface of the Nether Armor was covered in black flames. These flames came from the Nether Realm and eroded everything in the world. Even the primordial spirit and consciousness could not resist and directly burned the soul. Compared to the Infernal Ant, the Hell Ant didn't have the terrifying infernal flame, but could secrete a kind of black liquid inside its body. This liquid was extremely cold and had no temperature, but even the hardest, undying void metal couldn't resist this kind of liquid. The corrosion of the Hell Ant liquid. After a long time, it would definitely be eroded and penetrated. Even Xianxia's indestructible glass armor. If nothing unexpected happened, theoretically speaking, it wouldn't be able to withstand the bites of the Hell Ants. It should be known that even the void-swallowing beast, which was known as the Void Soldier Ladle, could not bite through the indestructible void metal. However, if Xianxia's indestructible glass armor, which was mixed with a piece of indestructible void metal, encountered a large group of Hell Ants, the result would most likely be a group of Hell Ants. Ants biting an elephant would still end up in tragedy. The reason why the Hell Ants could become one of the top 3 servant clans in the second universe was similar to the Void Rats. This clan's reproduction ability was also terrifying, and their numbers were too large. The entire Underworld Ant Star region was almost 3 times the size of the Demon Fiend Star region. Every star in the Underworld Ant Star region was inhabited by a large number of hell ants. This kind of life form had very low requirements for the environment. Even if it was not a habitable star, but an abandoned mineral star, they could still roam freely. Another reason why they were able to become one of the top 3 races was similar to the space mouse. It was because their bloodline was extremely valued by the Heaven's Legacy race. The Hell Ant's body secreted a terrifying corrosive black liquid, Hell Ant liquid, to the Heaven's Legacy race. This was a rare material that was absolutely necessary for industrial construction. This was because it could be used to break down almost any kind of hard metal. Moreover, this hellish ant elixir had many other miraculous uses, including a miraculous tempering effect on the bodies of the Heaven's Legacy race members. Moreover, even in the 2 camps of the human race in the 3rd universe, the Hell Ant liquid secreted by the Hell Ants was a sacred body tempering product that was hard to find, especially for starry sky powerhouses who walked the path of body tempering. As for the top families who researched gene cultivation fluid, they were even more eager to obtain it. This was because the Hell Ant liquid, after being processed and added to the cultivation fluid, could greatly improve its effect. It was said that some powerful beings of the universe directly used the Hell Ant liquid to cut off their hair and purify their marrow, and use it to forge their body. The Hell Ant liquid was secreted by every Hell Ant powerhouse. Of course, the quality of the Hell Ant liquid secreted by their bodies was also different due to the different cultivation realms. After all, it came from a main body of different life forms. In addition to the Hell Ant liquid, the most precious thing in the Hell Ant clan was actually the underworld liquid in the underworld pool. Before Yixian captured the infernal Ant clan's heaven and earth Taoist, Yi Jiuming, he had heard from him that every year, Yi Jiuming would be able to obtain 10 drops of nether liquid from the Holy Land's nether pool to baptize his ant armor. As time passed, although the black ant armor on Yi Jiuming's body had yet to evolve to the level of the Nether Ant clan's unique nether armor, which was able to produce black nether flames, its hardness was truly outrageous. Yixian used the Shun Nong pestle to transform into a big-headed black club and struck it with all his might, not leaving it behind. It left a small mark. Yixian could be said to be deeply affected by Yi Jiuming's hard black armor. At that time, the shock this opponent gave Yixian was almost the same as that of Shi Wanjin, who possessed the 9 Berserk Lion transformations and had already comprehended the 4th transformation. Once Shi Wanjin's 4th transformation was activated, he could instantly obtain a bloodline true body that was 100,000 zhang tall. His blood and qi were terrifyingly abundant, and he was simply an unkillable cockroach. Although Yi Jiuming did not have that ability, his black armor was too hard. Even the Shinnong pestle, the accessory of the Shinnong cauldron, could not leave a white mark on it. This was enough to explain the problem. Shi Wanjin only got 10 drops of underworld liquid every year, and he could obtain such a hard black armor. It was obvious that this underworld liquid was extraordinary. Otherwise, the underworld pool would not be called the Hell Ant clan's holy land. No one had ever entered it. In this expedition against the infernal ant race, other than subduing them like the spatial rat race and bringing them into his own alliance, Yixian didn't plan on letting go of the underworld liquid in the underworld pool, which was the underworld ant race. However, this matter gave him a headache. After all, on one hand, he had to recruit people into his alliance, and on the other hand, he had a scheme for the holy land of the Hell Ant clan. No matter how he thought about it, these 2 matters conflicted with each other. If he wanted to have the best of both worlds, he had to come up with a foolproof plan. Otherwise, he could only choose one of the 2. If that was really the case, Yixian was not willing to accept it. Fortunately, there was still plenty of time. It was impossible for an army of 10 million battleships to travel from the Rat Ruins star field to the Underworld Ant clan's ancestral land in the Underworld Ant clan. It would take about half a month for them to arrive. After the army set off, Yixian spent an entire day thinking about this matter, But no matter how he thought about it, he could not come up with a perfect plan. Helpless, he could only temporarily put this matter to the back of his mind. There were still 13 to 14 days before the long journey would end. Yixian really did not want to waste this period of time. Bored, he simply went to an independent cabin on the top floor of the fleet's flagship, the West Expedition. He took out a large amount of cultivation resources and handed them all to the devouring system to absorb the energy. Then he sat cross-legged in the cabin, closed his eyes, and began to cultivate in seclusion to break through. According to his experience, he had just broken through to a new realm with the help of the gene cultivation fluid. After stabilizing for a while, it was the best time to break through a small realm. There was basically no possibility of failure. Everything would happen naturally. Chapter 3846. After breaking through another small realm, Yixian was excited, but he immediately shook his head and smiled bitterly, because a strong sense of pressure suddenly descended upon them. Once he reached the great circle of the cosmic realm, he would have to use up the level 15 liquid he had. Now, he was already at the cosmic realm's second order, only 8 small steps away from the great circle of the cosmic realm. In other words, after 8 more small breakthroughs, Yixian would use 1 or 2 tubes of level 15 liquid and enter the universe realm. From then on, there would be no more gene cultivation liquid to use. Once he reached level 9, he could only stare at it helplessly, unable to break through, and his cultivation would stagnate. Unfortunately, after level 15 liquid, this kind of concoction method could no longer be used. According to Yixian's speculation, some methods and elements needed to be introduced to refine the flesh medicine. The Xianxia cauldron was a treasure, so he was not in a hurry in this regard. The key was that using this method to refine level 16 liquid was still a new topic. He had no experience to refer to, so he needed time to explore. It seems that after this expedition against the Hell Ant Clan ends, this young master will not be able to participate in the subsequent crusades against the other clans of the First Universe. Helplessly, Yixian shook his head and sighed. I have to calm down and carefully deduce and study the method to concoct the level 16 liquid. Yes, it's concoction. After the level 16 liquid, I can only obtain it through this method. Fortunately, once the Hell Ant Clan is incorporated, the top 3 slave clans of the First Universe will be combined into one force. Even if all the other clans unite, the strength of the 2 sides will be evenly matched. With Grandpa Mo in charge of commanding, the Hell Ant Clan and the Space Mouse Clan will each send a domain Lord Old Monster. With them in charge, there will be no problem. However, I have to find a way to obtain the Hell Ant Clan's nether liquid. This kind of thing is extremely extraordinary, just like the Een Demon Clan's innate cold Een Spirit liquid. It is very difficult to find elsewhere in the world. Perhaps it will have a certain effect on refining level 16 liquid with the Xianxia cauldron in the future. Thinking of this, Yixian's eyes flashed. No matter what, he had to obtain the Hell Ant Clan's nether liquid. After pondering for a moment, he decided to start with Yi Jiuming and see if he could make a breakthrough. After all, Yi Jiuming was the universe Taoist of the Hell Ant Clan, so he naturally knew more about the clan than Yixian. The Western Expedition was a huge fortress with a diameter of 100,000 meters. Its interior was incomparably spacious due to the use of folded space. Yixian found a spacious area and waved his hand to bring out the Farmer God Cauldron. Of course, it was not in its complete form. It was only 1,000 meters in diameter. Otherwise, it would really explode. Then, in a flash, Yixian stepped into the Xianxia cauldron and disappeared from the mouth of the cauldron. Ever since the native ferocious beasts were brought out of the root of all Evil Star region, the millions of native ferocious beasts had basically been living inside the Farmer God Cauldron. For this expedition, Yixian bringing the Farmer God Cauldron was equivalent to bringing an army of millions of ferocious beasts. It was the same for the primordial porcupine and the primordial hairy tortoise. If it were not for the war in the outside world, they would not be willing to leave the space inside the Farmer God Cauldron. When these native ferocious beasts were in the root of all Evil Star region, they had fought many battles. Almost every ferocious beast had stored some bloodline true bodies of the masters of various races in the Federation of the Second Universe. These were all meat ingredients. Originally, they had kept these meat ingredients in their storage magic treasures because they wanted to wait for Xian to roast them when he was free. However, now that they were in the Farmer God Cauldron and the strange tricolor flames were right in front of them, they could do it themselves. Xian had deliberately released tens of thousands of Farmer God tricolor flames of different diameters in the central region of the Farmer God Cauldron space. When these native ferocious beasts needed to roast their meat, they could take out their own ingredients and find a suitable Farmer God tricolor flames and roast them themselves. The reason why Xian's meat had made them drool before was not because of how good Xian's roasting skills were or what kind of secret ingredients he had in his hands. He did not need those. The power and effect of the Farmer God tricolor flames was the best catalyst. Even ordinary meat could instantly become a top-grade delicacy after being roasted by the Farmer God tricolor flames. After discovering this, the millions of ferocious beasts were immediately overjoyed. They identified the space inside the Farmer God Cauldron and refused to leave. Although there were only about 10,000 Farmer God tricolor flames, even if the millions of ferocious beasts wanted to roast their meat at the same time, there would only be a few hundred spots lined up next to each flame pillar. At most, they would have to wait for half a day before it was their turn. Such a scene was truly spectacular. The millions of native ferocious beasts were all holding various kinds of precious meat in their hands. They lined up in an orderly manner in front of the tricolor flames that rushed out of the volcano crater, waiting for their meat to be roasted. If this was recorded and sent out, it was estimated that the 3 universes would be in an uproar. Young Master Linghu's methods were too heaven-defying. The entire native ferocious beasts, the root of all evil, had been trained by him into a standard foodie. After Xian entered the Farmer God Cauldron, the first thing he saw was this scene. Even though he already knew that it might be such a scene, seeing it with his own eyes, Xian was still a little stunned. This was because he clearly saw that in front of the 2 largest tricolor flames, the primordial porcupine and the primordial hare, with a primordial porcupine and the primordial hare. The tortoise was clearly at the front of the line, roasting its own meat while drooling. He didn't look like an old monster of a domain lord at all. Xian shook his head and smiled bitterly. He didn't dare to stay here for long. With a flash of his figure, he directly came to the bottom plane of the central domain volcano and appeared in front of the mountain wall cage, where Yi Jioming, Meng Mashan, and Shi Wanjin were imprisoned. At this moment, Shi Wanjin was still in a deep sleep. His Taoist foundation had been destroyed, but Xian was soft-hearted last time and gave him some nourishing things. Looking at him now, he should be absorbing and recovering. Although his Taoist foundation had been taken away, and there was no hope for him to recover, if he was lucky, he could at least recover some of his cultivation base. Strength. At least he wouldn't die or become a cripple. After all, this brat had now become Xian's servant. If he really didn't care, Xian's heart would be a little bit unbearable. In the other 2 cages, Yi Jioming and Meng Mashan were sitting on the ground in the cages with a lifeless face. Both of them had a pair of big panda eyes and deep eye circles. At first glance, it was obvious that they hadn't had a good sleep recently. It was estimated that they hadn't rested at all. Suddenly looking up and seeing Xian coming, Yi Jioming and Meng Mashan were stunned for a moment, and then their bodies shook together. They hurriedly got up in a panic, holding the bars of the cages in their hands and begging Xian, "Fellow cultivator Xiao, no, young master, just let us go like farts. We can't live here. When I look up, millions of fierce beasts are lining up to roast meat. It's so scary." Chapter 38:47. These 2 guys were obviously scared out of their wits. As soon as they saw Xian, it was as if they had seen their savior. The first thing they did was to jump on the pillars of the cage, wishing they could squeeze out of the narrow gaps between the pillars. They kept talking, and in the end, before Xian could even respond, they had already sworn oaths. Moreover, they swore that they would be loyal to Xian from now on. Otherwise, their fates would be very miserable. Xian shuddered at the thought of it. It seemed that it was true. No one in the starry sky dared to make a joke of a Tao oath. Even though there were only heavenly laws in the three universes today, and there was no heavenly will, the Tao oath was the most feared invisible sword above the heads of the starry sky masters. Of course, the reason why Yi Jioming and Meng Masan surrendered so readily this time was not only because they were frightened by the millions of fierce beasts roasting meat around the crater day and night, but also because of the despair in their hearts. Last time, they had seen with their own eyes that Shi Wanjin, who had sworn to die, was turned into a little sheep in the blink of an eye by some terrifying means of Yixian. Since then, these two guys had not rested much. Every time they closed their eyes, they would have nightmares. In fact, Yixian Slave Seal was only a preliminary mutation at present and could not be used on Starry Sky Masters at all. Previously, Shi Wanjin's Tao Foundation had been destroyed and his cultivation had been completely lost, so he was lucky enough to succeed. If he really used it on them, there would be no possibility of success. But they did not know this. In the opinion of Yi Jioming and Meng Masan, if they took the initiative to swear allegiance, they could at least retain their status as subordinates and not slaves. Compared with Shi Wanjin, who had lost his Tao Foundation and became a slave, the two of them had no damage to their Tao Foundation, and their cultivation was still the same. Moreover, they had only sworn allegiance to him, so they were not slaves. This was absolutely a great blessing. Of course, this was only their wishful thinking at present. Whether young Master Ling Hu would agree or not was still uncertain. It was precisely because of this that Yi Jioming and Meng Masan immediately shut their mouths after swearing the Tao oath. They held onto the bars of the cage and looked at Yi Xian with pitiful eyes. She was extremely nervous. She was afraid that he would flatly refuse. If that happened, it would really be over. Yi Xian was not in a hurry to agree. He fell into deep thought. Both Yi Jioming and Meng Masan had already made a Tao oath, so there was naturally no need to doubt the authenticity of this matter. Moreover, Yi Xian hadn't taken away their Tao foundations, so there was no need for them to doubt the authenticity of this matter. Moreover, Yi Xian hadn't taken away their Tao foundations. It was not impossible for them to be loyal to their own race. However, this matter required a reasonable method. Otherwise, if they were suddenly released, even if the two of them returned to their respective clans, they would be secretly monitored and listed as suspects who had defected to the enemy. This was indeed a problem, but Yi Xian quickly understood. Putting aside the heaven and earth Tao child of the giant ferocious clan, Meng Masan, at the very least, if he wanted Yi Jioming to return his clan, this was the best opportunity. Taking advantage of the alliance with the Hell Ant clan, expressing goodwill to the other party, and handing over the heaven and earth Tao child of the Hell Ant clan, who was imprisoned in his hands, was originally a reasonable thing to do. However, just sending one of his own pawns to the Hell Ant clan was clearly far from enough for Yi Xian. Yi Xian's main goal in coming to interrogate Yi Jioming this time was actually the underworld liquid in the holy land of the underworld pool. Originally, I wanted to come down and take you out, forcing out the bloodline true body, so that Brother Pig and Brother Turtle could roast some wine. Since the oath has been made, then let's drop this matter. Yi Xian held back his laughter in his heart, but his face was extremely serious, even revealing a cold intent. These simple words almost scared the two fellows in the cage to the ground. Fortunately, they heard Yi Xian say that he would drop this matter, so they resisted. Otherwise, they might have fainted on the spot. Don't worry, I won't let the fierce beast brothers come down to harass you. Yi Xian nodded, then turned to look at Yi Jioming on the other side. As for Yi Jioming, this young master happens to be in the Nether Ant Star domain right now, so I could send you back now. However, this young master came to the nest of the Hell Ant clan, this time with a purpose. Since you have already pledged your loyalty to this young master, since you have pledged your loyalty, then take this opportunity to prove yourself. Hearing that Yi Xian happened to be in the Nether Ant Star domain right now, Yi Jioming was stunned. Then he gritted his teeth and steeled his heart. Young master, if there's anything you need, feel free to tell me. although he was still unwilling to harm his clan. Immortal also knew that even without his help, with young Master Linghu's monstrous methods, he would definitely succeed in the end no matter what scheme he had, including the fact that he had come to the Hell Ant clan this time and coveted a certain treasure, including the fact that he needed Immortal's help. If Immortal did not agree, he would directly use the secret technique that he had used to deal with Shi Wanjin. It was straightforward and saved him trouble. Immortal was a smart person. Although his loyalty to his clan was still there, he could clearly see the situation. The only thing in his mind now was to act as a buffer between his clan and Linghu Chong, the young master he had just recognized. Now that young Master Linghu had come to the Nether Ant Star Domain, he would definitely not give up without some gains. After weighing the pros and cons, he made a decision to help young Master Linghu get what he wanted and send this great Buddha away as soon as possible. Thinking of this, Immortal asked tentatively, "Young Master, the purpose of your visit to the Hell Ant clan?" "Nether Liquid." Since they were on the same side, even if Immortal was the Taoist of the Hell Ant clan, Yixian did not hide anything. He waved his hand and said, "Originally, I wanted to empty it like the Nth Demon clan's Holy Landing Pool, but now, for your sake, this young master will only take half." "All right." "Pooh!" Immortal was so shocked that he almost vomited blood on the spot. His expression immediately became strange as he muttered, "There is no such thing as all in half. The Nether Pool is different from the Een Pool of the Een Demon clan. It is not a ready-made pool of Nether Liquid. The Nether Liquid is secreted from the remains of the Nether Ancestor. In the Hell Ant clan's Holy Land Nether Pool, there are 2 Nether Ancestor remains. These 2 Nether Ancestor remains will drip a drop of Nether Liquid every day. In other words, the entire Hell Ant clan only produces slightly more than 700 drops every year. Chapter 3848. Underworld Ancestors Remains? There are 2 of them? That's great. Before Immortal could finish, Yixian's eyes lit up. He nodded and continued. "That's great. Keep one and take the other. Isn't that half of what I just said?" Puff. This time, Immortal really vomited blood. His face was filled with shock as he stared blankly at Yixian. After confirming that he wasn't joking, he shook his head and bitterly smiled. Forget it. If you want to take one away, then take one away. As long as young master has the ability to take away the remains of the Underworld Ancestor, it's fine. At least you left one for my Hell Ant clan and didn't cut off the supply of Underworld Liquid." "What? You can't take it?" Yixian frowned. Then, as if he suddenly remembered something, he continued to ask, "By the way, what is this Underworld Ancestor?" "Underworld Ant? Doesn't that mean that there are 2 bloodline primordial ancestors remains in the Underworld Pool of your Hell Ant clan? That's a primordial ancestor level existence. Of course, it's not a real primordial Underworld Ant. It's a primordial ancestor level existence. It doesn't exist now, even if it's just a corpse," Immortal said seriously. "But these 2 Underworld Ancestors aren't much different from the real primordial Underworld Ant. They're the first-generation descendants of the primordial Underworld Ant, the bloodline primordial ancestor of the Hell Ant clan. Although they're not real primordial Underworld Ants, they have the purest Underworld Ant bloodline. Their Underworld armor is extremely tough. Even though they've been dead for countless years, they're still burning with black Underworld flames. I'm sure you've heard of the Underworld flames. Even the current Hell Ant clan's patriarch doesn't dare to touch it. Because of this, it's basically impossible to take the remains of these 2 Underworld Ancestors. They've been in the Underworld Pool for countless years. That's where they're buried. As for the Nether Liquid, it's actually the best Hellish Ant liquid. It's the secretion of the 2 Underworld Ancestors' remains. Although the 2 Underworld Ancestors have been dead for countless years, some functions of their remains are still functioning normally. That's why the Nether Liquid was created. So the Nether Liquid is the Hellish Ant liquid secreted by the Nether Ants, who are half a step away from the Desolate Era. Yixian nodded solemnly and said, "Although these are the remains of your race's bloodline ancestor, they've been dead for a long time. Besides, I'm not taking them away for other purposes, such as roasting them, but to collect the nether liquid. I'm refining a level 16 liquid. If I succeed, a tube of it will allow a Cosmo State expert to advance to the first level of the Star-Lord state. According to my analysis of the characteristics of the nether liquid, the formula of the level 16 liquid should require the addition of the nether liquid. So, if you can help me take it away, I'll be able to refine it. I'll give you one of the netherworld race's skeletal remains after the level 16 liquid is formed. What? Level 16 liquid? Just as Xian finished speaking, Jioming cried out involuntarily, "Young master, did you say something wrong?" When you were in the first universe's science and technology faction, the Tuoba family of the Heavenly War Empire, didn't you refine a level 12 gene cultivation fluid? The next level to be refined should be level 13. That's more like it. Young Master Linghu had risen to fame precisely because of what Jioming had told him. 80% of the Tuoba family's resources had been consumed by Yi Xian, who had appeared as Linghu's young master. In the end, he had successfully refined the level 11 and level 12 liquids. Yi Xian had given the formula and the finished product of the level 11 liquid to the Tuoba family, but he had only given one vial of the level 12 liquid. He had intended to leave the Heavenly War Empire without giving the formula. As a result, the head of the Tuoba family turned against him. In the end, Yi Xian demonstrated the Dongshu shuttle's killing array system, and the three wonders of pills, tools, and arrays were known throughout the three planes. Although it was already in the past, counting the time, it was actually only half a year ago. Therefore, it was no wonder that Jioming was so shocked. Half a year ago, he had just refined a level 12 liquid. Now, he said that he was going to refine a level 16 liquid. No one would believe this if they heard this. As a matter of fact, Jioming was both shocked and overjoyed. He was currently in a universe state, the 15th realm. The level 16 liquid was just right for him. It had to be noted that, under normal circumstances, it would take not only a long time to break through from the universe state to the Star-Lord state, but also opportunities and luck. Although there were many Star-Lords in the three planes of the universe, it was easy to understand when one thought about the large number of universe state experts. Only one Star-Lord would appear in 1,000 universe state experts. The rest would never encounter such an opportunity to break through in their entire lives. Although Jioming was the universe state sex Dao child of the Hell Ant clan and had the support of his clan, it was almost inevitable that he would break through to the Star-Lord state. Even so, it would take at least 100 years. However, if he was given a vial of the level 16 liquid, he would instantly become a Star-Lord once he successfully broke through the shackles of his physical potential. That was the wonder of the gene cultivation liquid created by the eternal dynasty of the human race's science and technology camp. It had a unique temptation. Even though the gene cultivation liquid of the eternal dynasty was hard to come by, and the highest level known was only the level 12 liquid, using this method to cultivate would still promote there were still countless Star-Lords who had evolved in terms of life level. It was too convenient. A vial of gene cultivation liquid represented a breakthrough in a major realm. The temptation was irresistible. I don't need to lie to you about this. Yi Xian saw that Jioming was excited. He smiled and took out a small space box from the undying world in his body. After opening it, there was a row of gene cultivation liquids in the box from the level 10 liquid to the level 15 liquid. The 6 vials of gene cultivation liquids were different in color. Although they were motionless, there were countless tiny runes that looked like nanos appearing and disappearing at all times. When one's eyes sank slightly, it was as if one's entire mind was about to be pulled in. The aura vaguely revealed was even stronger than the previous one, making one's breath stop. Jioming and Meng Mashan's eyes were wide open. Level 9 liquids can be obtained in the Eternal Dynasty as long as one has the strength. As for the level 10 liquid, although the Tuoba family has already concocted it, there isn't much of it. It's difficult to find a vial on the market. While speaking, Yi Xian waved the small space box in his hand. There are 6 vials of gene cultivation liquids in here. This is a set from the level 10 liquid to the level 15 liquid. They were all concocted by me. I still have a few sets of such high-level liquids that are no longer available on the market. This undoubtedly confirmed what Xian had just said. The level 15 liquid was already completed. Naturally, the level 16 liquid would be concocted next. Chapter 3849. Naturally, the Holy Land of the Hell Ant clan was not a place that could be entered casually. In fact, back when he was in the Space Rat clan, Xian would not have had the opportunity to enter the forbidden ground of the Space Rat clan, the Rat Ruins Grotto Heaven. Of course, he could force his way in, but in that case, he would have to subdue the Hell Ant clan with violence. Although the combined forces of the demons and the Space Rat clan did not have the strength to do so, it would undoubtedly leave behind a hidden danger. Moreover, the Hell Ant clan might have a universe-level ancestor in hibernation. If he were to force his way in and alarm that level of existence, he would have no chance of winning unless the Headless Infant Corpse made a move. The Headless Infant Corpse was Xian's greatest trump card and could not be used frequently. Therefore, Xian basically planned to rope in the Hell Ant clan like the Space Rat clan. Since that was the case, he naturally could not force his way into the Holy Land of the Hell Ant clan unless there was an unforeseen event in the Holy Land. Moreover, Xian had to be in the Hell Ant clan and had reached an agreement with them and become their ally. At that time, he would naturally have a reason to enter the Holy Land. As for taking the opportunity to obtain the remains of the Hell Ant clan's underworld ancestor, he would just have to act according to the circumstances. However, Xian needed a spy in this matter, and Yi Jiuming was naturally the best candidate. After a brief discussion, the two of them came up with a preliminary plan. Then, Xian left the internal space of the Farmer God Cauldron. After keeping the Farmer God Cauldron in his undying world, Xian entered his cabin again. With the terrifying calculation ability of the Devouring system, he deduced everything related to using the Farmer God Cauldron to refine the level 16 blood and flesh medicine. Soon, he was engrossed in it and forgot the passage of time. When Xian came out of seclusion and walked out of his cabin, he discovered that they had already arrived at the underworld ant star field. The subjugation fleet took a short rest in the void outside the underworld ant star field. Then, with the millions of fortresses leading the way, they sailed into the underworld ant star field in a grandiose manner. Compared to the Rat Ruins galaxy, which was full of holes in the universe, the Nether Ant galaxy appeared to be very normal. In fact, it was not just normal, it was excessively normal. The void was the same, and so were the stars. However, the strange thing was that no matter if it was the abandoned mineral star or the inhabited star, the surface of the land was as if it had never been developed. There were almost no man-made structures. On the surface of the mineral stars, there were at most some mining pits. On the surface of the planets that were full of life, there were oceans, continents, and forests. There was not a single building to be seen. But in fact, these planets were indeed the habitat of the Hellish Ant clan. The reason why he couldn't see a single Hell Ant was because they were all underground. The worlds below the surface of these planets were the nests of the Hell Ants. Xian, the higher-ups of the fleet, Grandpa Mo, Qigong, and the others had long known about this. Therefore, as they followed the fleet into the Nether Ant star domain, they saw the stars along the way. Whether it was abandoned or stars or life stars, Liu Biao couldn't see any traces of the Infernal Ant clan. They were not surprised at all. What really surprised them was that there was not a single warship in the void after they entered the Nether Ant galaxy. It seemed that the entire Hell Ant clan had gone into hiding and given up all resistance, so that the entire huge punitive army could march straight into the city. The news of everything that had happened in the Space Rat clan must have already been sent to the Hell Ant clan. However, the current situation was so strange that it immediately caused Xian and the others to be suspicious. They couldn't figure out what exactly the Hell Ant clan was doing. According to the star map, the Nether Ant planet, the headquarters of the Hell Ant clan, is in the void more than 20 million kilometers ahead. We have already traveled more than 10 million kilometers into the Nether Ant galaxy. but we haven't seen a single warship of the Hell Ant clan. Not even a single member of the Hell Ant clan. In the command cabin on the top floor of the main flagship fortress, West Expedition, Grandpa M.O. frowned with a puzzled look on his face. What exactly are the higher-ups of the Hell Ant clan up to? Are they planning to have a final battle with us on the Nether Ant planet? In short, they won't migrate like the Heaven's Legacy clan. Yixian nodded. He was very sure of this because he had learned some things from Yi Jioming. The Hell Ant clan's holy land was not like the Space Rat clan's forbidden ground, the Rat Ruins Grotto Heaven. It was a small, hidden space. It was in the depths of the underground nest of the Hell Ant planet. The remains of the two nether ancestors of the Hell Ant clan, who could secrete a drop of nether liquid every day, could not be taken away because they were burning with black nether flames. The Hell Ant clan would not give up the remains of the two nether ancestors no matter what. Therefore, it was impossible for the entire clan to migrate. Demon, Linghu, and fellow Taoists of the Space Rat clan, welcome to the Hell Ant clan. What brings you here? Right at this moment, a deep and dignified old voice came from the end of the void. Grandpa M.O., who was beside Yi Xian, changed his expression immediately. He exclaimed, "Realm Lord Old Monster, the Hell Ant clan is indeed prepared. They sent such a powerful existence right away. What do they want? So what if they're Realm Lords? Don't forget that we can have the projections of 4 Realm Lords here at any time." Yi Xian smiled casually and fearlessly. He stepped out of the main flagship fortress, West Punitive Expedition. Grandpa M.O. and the rest of the demons followed closely behind him. In the fleet of the Space Rat clan on the right side of the huge warship army, Shu Qiansui, the leader of the Space Rat clan, stepped out of the flagship fortress with a few Star Lords and stood in the void to show support. Yi Xian was obviously counting the Realm Lord Golden Rat of the Space Rat clan when he mentioned the 4 Realm Lords who could arrive at any time. There were already the Demon Emperor, the Mad Mosquito Emperor, and Mosquito Butcher. Including him, there would be 4 Realm Lords on this day. With the descent of the projection clones of these 4 Sector Lord-level old freaks. Even if the other party sent out 2 Sector Lord-level old freaks at the same time and used their true bodies to confront the subjugation army, they wouldn't be able to pose any threat. Furthermore, the Sector Lord-level Nether Ant that spoke up now was merely a single one. Therefore, Yi Xian was very confident. At this moment, he stepped out of the flagship fortress and went to the void outside. However, he didn't summon the Shinnong Cauldron to protect himself like he did in the Space Rat clan's Rat Ruins Planet Zone. Chapter 3850. In the distance, at the end of the void, a few figures quickly appeared, stepping on the void. These experts were all the higher-ups of the Hell Ant clan, but at this moment, they did not reveal their bloodline true bodies. They appeared in human form. The leader was a Sector Lord Old Monster named Ant Blood Dome. The aura within his body was faintly discernible, displaying the supreme aura of a Sector Lord. Following him were 2 old monsters at the State Lord level. They were the clan leader, Ant Song, and the clan leader, Ant Ba. Behind them were a few ordinary elders of the Hellish Ants, all of whom were Star Lords. Seniors of the Hellish Ants, I'm Ling Hu. Greetings. Since the main character had already appeared, he didn't seem to have any intention of starting a war. Yi Xian was certain in his heart. He cupped his hands towards the air in front of him, then continued. This time, I didn't come to the infernal ant race with the intention of starting a war, but to discuss a grand plan with the infernal ant race. Since it's a grand plan, let's talk about it in detail. Ling Hu, my young friend, please come to the nest of my race's ancestral land. Aunt Xueqiong, the Sector Lord, smiled casually. I'll take my leave first. I'll wait for you in the nest. Then, he turned around and left with the experts of the Hellish Ants. They had come quickly and left even faster. The 2 parties had met for less than a minute. By the time Yi Xian and Grandpa M.O. came back to their senses, the enemy was no longer at the end of the void. He had already returned to the nest on the Hellish Ant planet. Grandpa M.O. frowned again and reminded Yi Xian, that guy's attitude is a bit weird. We have to be careful. None of the Sector Lords are stupid. If there wasn't the precedent of the Space Rat Clan, the Hell Ant Clan sector Lord Ol Monster might have played some tricks. However, with the precedent, he had a lot of things to consider. At the very least, he had to figure out the real reason why the Space Rat Clan was unexpectedly subdued. I won't attack until then. Yixian lightly smiled and didn't mind. After that, he, Grand Elder Mo, and Mo Qigong boarded the flagship of the Western Expedition and followed them through the void. As for the other warships, they remained where they were. This was also a sign of their stance. An enormous planet with life soon appeared ahead of them as they flew at full speed. However, there were still no buildings on the surface of the planet. A Star Lord of the Hellish Ants was waiting outside the atmosphere. The West Expedition stopped. Yixian, Grandpa Mo, Elder Mo, and the Chief of the Space Rat Clan, Rat Xianxia, stepped out of the battleship. The Space Mouse Clan expert cupped his fists and turned around to lead the way. After a short while, they passed through the atmosphere, entered the interior of the star, and landed in a huge valley. There was a cave in the valley that was large enough to accommodate a fortress with a diameter of 100,000 meters. It was the entrance to the underground world of the Nether Ant planet. After entering, he realized that the underground space was even bigger. The whole planet was like a super fortress. The surface of the planet was just the hull, and the inside was the living space. The interior of the planet had been hollowed out. There were plains, canyons, and even oceans inside. It was quite a breathtaking sight. There were buildings inside the planet. Ant Xianxia, the sector lord of the Hellish Ants, had already set up a banquet in a magnificent hall. He stood up to greet Yixian and the others when they arrived. The atmosphere was quite harmonious. It didn't look like a war was about to break out at all. Once they were seated, Ant Xianxia went straight to the point and asked the most important question. Everyone, may I ask what the relationship between the demons, young Master Linghu, and the Space Rat Clan is? There's no hurry. Yixian waved his hand and said with a casual smile, First of all, I have to make one thing clear. I don't mean any harm by coming here. This is a Tao disciple of my clan. I'm sending him out to show my attitude. As he spoke, Yixian activated the Shinnon Cauldron, which was only 100 meters long and stood at the center of the hall. Then, a man dashed out of the cauldron. It was none other than Yi Jioming. Even Grandpa Mo Qigong, and the head of the Space Rat Clan, Shu Qiansui, were surprised by this action. As for the Hellish Ants, when Ant Xianxia saw the Shinnon Cauldron, his eyes narrowed. Then, he turned to look at Yi Jioming, who was standing in the hall and looking around blankly. The latter's body was deliberately in a sorry state, and he was even slightly injured. However, his complexion was still good, at least compared to the Tao disciples of the Second Universe, who were on their last breaths. It was a world of difference. Ant Xianxia's expression relaxed as he waved his hand and said, Go get a drop of underworld liquid and heal your injuries. Then, after Yi Jioming left, Yixian waved his hand and put away the Shinnon Cauldron. Then, he cupped his hands towards Yixian and said, Thank you, little friend Linghu, for showing mercy. The core higher-ups of the Hell Ant clan were obviously aware of the fact that the Heaven and Earth Tao children who had been redeemed by the various races of the Second Universe were all on their last breaths and had long been crippled. Because of this, when they saw Yi Jioming return in one piece, other than Blood Ant Sky, the other high-ranking members of the Hell Ant clan who were present, their expressions also softened a little. If this old man's guess is correct, Little Friend should have reached some kind of agreement with the Devil Cultivator and the Space Mouse clan, right? Ant Xianxia smiled faintly as his gaze swept across the crowd. In the end, his gaze landed on Yixian. This old man has a good idea of the situation in the First Universe. The Heaven's legacy race will return sooner or later, and the various slave races should not be in a state of disunity. Otherwise, their fate will be the same. What are the details of the agreement between us? This was clearly asking for details and intending to join the group. Yixian had long since had a plan in mind, so he immediately said, We have formed an alliance. Of course, the name has not been decided yet, because the Alliance is currently in a secret state and will not be known to the outside world. And this time, this young master's intention is to give your Hell Ant clan a gold member spot. The so-called gold member represents strength and nobility. A race with a gold member will have a seat in the Alliance Elder Council as a gold elder. Right now, the Alliance already has 4 gold elders. They are the first-generation Demon Emperor, the Mad Mosquito Emperor, the Old Devil Mosquito Butcher, and the Space Mouse Clan Sector Lord Senior Gene. The races and powers that the 4 of them represent are naturally all gold members. Only the few races that joined the Alliance at the beginning of its establishment will have similar gold members. There will not be more than 9 of them in total. No matter how strong the later races are, they can only become silver members at most. Below the gold members, there are silver members, bronze members, and then the most basic ordinary members. Chapter 38:51. After the Alliance grows stronger, everything will be decided by the elders. The 9 gold elders will be the highest existences in the elder group, and this young master will be the chief executive of the Alliance, in charge of carrying out the decisions of the elder group. Speaking to here, Yixian waved his hand again, taking out 2 small space boxes and handing them to Ant Blood Dome. Inside is a cubic meter of underworld furnace milk and 9 colored meat paste. If Senior Ant agrees to join the Alliance as a gold elder, this will be your personal salary for a year. As for the distribution of benefits, the elders will decide. In the future, the elders will decide on a regular distribution. Ant Blood Dome had been listening attentively. Halfway through, he saw Yixian suddenly hand over the resources. His face was clearly startled, and then he took the small space boxes. His face revealed a look of suspicion. He sent his spirit sense into the small space boxes, and his expression changed drastically. He took in a cold breath. See, this thing. He was the same as the Spatial Rat Clan Sector Lord Goldenrat, an existence of the Sector Lord level. Ordinary heavenly and earthly treasures had almost no effect on his path of evolution. Even the most rare treasures had very weak effects. The milk and meat paste in the 2 small space boxes were emitting an aura that shocked him. Even a Sector Lord would have great use for it, and the effect would definitely be extraordinary. At this time, Yixian continued, "This underworld furnace milk and 9 color meat paste is only the salary that the Alliance is currently giving to the gold elders. In the future, there will be better things. After all, the underworld furnace milk and 9 color meat paste. One is the byproduct of the underworld furnace. The other is the raw material of the underworld furnace. They are not the official products of the underworld furnace. The byproduct is already so shocking, and the raw material is condensed from the flesh and blood of ancient life forms above the universe level. It is obvious how high the grade of the final product will be and how heaven-defying its effects will be. Of course, this young master still doesn't know what the final product of the underworld furnace is. Previously, the alliance of the various races of the second universe suffered great losses and paid such a huge price in the source of all evil star field, but they didn't get a single drop of milk and meat paste. This young master can get the underworld furnace milk and 9-color meat paste. The body already explains the problem. At this point, Yixian didn't say anything else and patiently waited. On the other hand, the old monster of the Hell Ant race, Blood Sky, played with the 2 small spatial boxes in his hands and fell into deep thought. After a short while, a bright light flashed in Xueqiong's eyes, and then he nodded and said, "All right, my Netherworld Ant Clan has decided to join your alliance." At this point, the top 3 slave clans of the first universe had finally formed an alliance. Other than the Sector Lord Old Monsters of the 3 clans, there was also Mad Mosquito Emperor and Old Devil Mosquito Butcher. The alliance had a total of 5 gold elders. In fact, Yixian's camp actually had a gold elder that had been secretly appointed. That was the Sector Master of the origin of all evil's native vicious beast tribe. It was just that he hadn't come out of seclusion yet. However, Yixian would reserve the seat for him. When the time came, he would also occupy the seat of a gold-ranked elder in the alliance. and the entire Dire Beast clan behind him would become another gold-ranked member of the Alliance. Out of the 9 great gold-ranked members, including the native Vicious Beast tribe, there were currently 6 of them. Among the members of the Alliance who would be lucky enough to become gold-ranked members, there were only 3 spots left. At this moment, as the Netherworld Ant Clan Sector Lord Old Monster and Xianxia decided to join the Alliance, the atmosphere in the hall instantly became harmonious. Everyone drank and chatted merrily as they began to discuss the next target of the crusade. As a member of the Alliance, the Netherworld Ant Clan would naturally send out a huge fleet to participate in the crusade. At the same time, at the end of a half-sealed canyon in the depths of the Nether Ant planet. In the depths of this canyon was the Netherworld Ant Clan's sacred land, the Netherworld Pond. Right now, the Netherworld Ant Clan's universe, child, Ant Jioming, who had just been released by Yi Xian from the Farmer God Cauldron, was in the sacred land. The so-called Netherworld Pond was actually the final resting place of the 2 first-generation Netherworld ants. It was located in a cave on the cliff of the canyon. There were 2 such caves in total. At the end of the canyon, they were connected by the cliff on the left and right, one in the east and one in the west. The cave was very big. Looking in from the outside, one would only be able to see a small portion of the Netherworld ancestors' black-armored remains. However, even the small portion was already over 1,000 zhang long. From this, one could see how huge the 2 Netherworld ancestors' remains were. However, the majority of the body was inside the cave. It was impossible to see it, let alone enter it. This was because the 2 Netherworld ancestors' remains in the cave were always burning with black Netherworld flames. Even immortal rank existences were extremely afraid of them. Fortunately, although the black Netherworld flames were always there, they weren't very strong. They only burned on the surface of the 2 Netherworld ancestors' remains. They were only about a foot high and didn't spread out of the cave. At the edge of the cave, a groove was cut into the cliff. It extended all the way to 1,000 zhang below the cliff, forming a small pool. In the 2 small pools, there were more than 10 drops of pure black liquid. They didn't fuse together. Instead, each drop was independent of each other. They were like black crystals shining brightly. This was the underworld elixir, which was secreted by the first generation of the ancient underworld ants. Even the top-grade underworld ant elixir could not compare to it. They were not the same thing at all. The grade of the underworld elixir was far superior. At this moment, there were no other hell ant tribe powerhouses present at the edge of the Netherworld Pond. On the cliff walls on both sides of the canyon, there were many other caves. In the caves closer to the center, there were a few hell ant tribe bloodline ancestors. Like the space rat tribe, they had universe existences. There were also supreme immortals who surpassed the universe realm. However, these bloodline ancestors hadn't been born yet. In addition, on the cliff walls on both sides of the canyon, near the periphery, there were the nests of some important people in the tribe. As the universe Tao child of the tribe, Ijioming also had a cave here that was used as a nest for secluded cultivation. This time, he returned to the tribe with injuries. The realm lord Old Monster Xianxia opened his golden mouth and allowed Ijioming to come to the depths of the Netherworld Pond to take a drop of Netherworld liquid to heal his injuries. Ijioming was the universe Tao child of the tribe. He came to the Netherworld Pond to take the Netherworld liquid on his own accord. Naturally, no one would stop him. A drop of Netherworld liquid was quickly taken out by him from the left side of the cliff wall. However, at the same time as he took out this drop of ant liquid, Ijioming also quietly flicked his finger and shot out a weak ray of light, flying straight towards the cave where the corpse of a nether ancestor of his clan was hibernating. In the blink of an eye, this weak light had already rushed into the cave and landed on the Netherworld ancestor's remains. The surface of the remains was steaming with black Netherworld flames. This kind of Netherworld flames could burn all things, but it seemed to be ineffective against this weak light. Chapter 3852. Boom! An earth-shattering boom of thunder rang out. A wave of flames suddenly surged into the sky from the cave above the Nightmare Cliff. A boundless aura erupted, and even the colossal nether ant planet trembled slightly. In the cave, the enormous ancestor of the underworld's corpse, which was hundreds of thousands of feet tall, originally only had black underworld flames rising from its body. But now, for some reason, the black underworld liquid that was rising from its body suddenly increased. In the blink of an eye, it was already several feet tall, and it was still continuing to increase. This is too big, isn't it? At the same time that the thunderous explosion suddenly erupted, Xu Jioming, who was below the nightmare wall, had been shaken to the ground. At this moment, his face was filled with shock. Originally, he just wanted to make a little noise in the nether pool to alarm the people who were discussing in the clan hall and create an opportunity for Yi Xian to enter the nether pool. But the outcome had greatly exceeded Yi Jioming's expectations. No matter what, he'd never imagined that the wisp of weak light he shot out with a flick of his finger would actually possess such might. After it entered the netherworld ancestor's corpse within the cave on the nightmare wall, it actually caused the black nether flames to rise explosively by over 3M, and it was still rising incessantly. Looking at this movement, the flame wave had already burned out the entrance of the nightmare wall cave. It was obvious that the cave was already a sea of fire. If this continued, even if the nether ancestor's corpse, which was emitting black nether flames from its body, was fine, this nether pool, the ancestral land of the nether pool, would be completely burned down sooner or later. It was fine if a canyon was burned down, but it was the same to change a place as the ancestral land of the nether pool. The key was that in the distant caves, there were still the bloodline ancestors of the Hell Ant clan sleeping in seclusion. They had not come out yet, and could not be easily awakened. If the terrifying black nether flame were to spread to those ancient caves, wouldn't it incinerate all the bloodline patriarchs who were in seclusion? Thinking of this, Yi Jioming's face turned green. F***. This is the prelude to something bad happening with the nether flame. With this kind of anxious and frightened feeling, he turned around and fled the underworld lake's sacred land. Along the way, he saw many high-ranking members of the clan rushing out of the caves on both sides of the cliff. They were all alarmed by the tremor just now. Yi Jioming didn't dare to make sound. He blended into the crowd and didn't arouse any suspicion. At the same time, in the meeting hall of the Hell Ant clan, this time, the Ant tribe had come to the Infernal Realm to recruit people. Everything was going too smoothly. They didn't even use a single soldier. In fact, there wasn't even a single unpleasant word between the two sides. The matter was completely settled. This was mainly because of the precedent of the Space Rat clan. At this moment, while both parties were drinking and chatting happily, Yi Xian's heart was in his throat from the beginning to the end. He was worried about the matter with Yi Jioming, and he was worried that this kid would be too slow in making a move. At that time, everything that needed to be discussed would be settled, and it wouldn't be good for him to continue staying in the Hell's Ant clan's nest. If that kid, Yi Jioming, only made a move after he left, then no matter how chaotic the situation here was, it would have nothing to do with him. He had wasted a drop of all evil origin liquid for nothing. Yet he didn't even have the chance to enter the Hell's Ant clan's underworld lake. That would be too depressing. Right at this moment, the entire hall suddenly shook slightly, and then a world-shaking thunderclap resounded from the distance. Everyone in the hall who was originally raising their cups and chatting was stunned, including Yi Xian. They did it on purpose. Then they turned around and looked towards the outside of the hall. The expressions of the high-ranking members of the Hell Ant clan changed abruptly, and they stood up in shock and cried out involuntarily. What happened? Based on the location, the thunderclap actually came from the underworld lake. Even the entire underworld Ant star shook slightly. This is absolutely a huge matter. How is this possible? Exactly what happened? Amidst the exclamations, the Hell Ant clan sector lord Old Monster, Yi Xiuqiang, subconsciously swept his gaze towards Yi Xian, Grand Elder Amo, and the others, and his eyes were filled with suspicion. However, this suspicion quickly dissipated. He was an old monster at the Realm Lord level. Yi Xian and the other three had been waiting right under his nose the entire time. If they wanted to secretly do something, it would be impossible for them to escape his senses. As for Yi Jiuming, who had left the hall not long ago, Yi Xueqiong didn't suspect him at all. After all, he was a Dao child of his clan, so it was completely impossible. Right at this moment, a group of high-ranking members of the Hell Ant clan rushed into the hall, and all of them had extremely flustered expressions. Before they even entered the hall, cries of alarm had already resounded from their mouths. "Ancestor, this is bad. Something has happened to the underworld lake." One of the two skeletons of the netherworld ancestor suddenly erupted in an abnormal state. Black netherworld flames surged, and the sacred cave was already a sea of fire. The netherworld flames even burned out of the cave entrance, and its power is still rising. From the looks of it, it seems like the entire Holy Land will be incinerated. The bloodline ancestors of our clan have yet to be born, so they can't be awakened at all. This what? There's actually such a thing? The Sector Lord Old Monster Yi Xueqiong's expression changed once again. When he heard that something had happened to one of the two underworld ancestor skeletons, and that the underworld flames had already burned out of the holy cave, he instantly realized the severity of the matter, and his heart sank to the bottom of the valley. Let's go take a look at the situation. With his heart burning with worry, the Sector Lord Old Monster Yi Xueqiong's figure flashed, and had already left the discussion hall. The core members of the Hell Ant clan followed closely behind. Yi Xian, Grand Elder Mo, Grand Elder Mo, Grand Elder Mo, and the Space Rat clan's Old Monster Shu Qiansui exchanged glances. After hesitating for a moment, they finally followed in the end. Everyone was already allies, and now that such a shocking incident had happened to the Hell Ant clan, it was reasonable for them to follow and see if there was anything they could help with. Very quickly, the group of people arrived at the depths of the Nether Ant planet, the Great Canyon where the Holy Land Nether Pond was located. Around the entrance of the Great Canyon, there were already a large number of experts of the Hell Ant clan watching in fear, including Yi Jiuming, who was mixed in with the crowd. Although it was called a canyon, in reality, it was two opposite walls that pierced into the sky. They were quite far apart from each other, at least 1,000 kilometers apart. From this, it could be seen how vast the canyon was. At this moment, the entire narrow and vast canyon had long since been thrown into chaos. The caves at the front and middle of the canyon were the seclusion grounds of the upper echelons of the Hell Ant clan that had already emerged. Now, the caves on the left side of the canyon were almost empty, and everyone had escaped. However, at the back of the canyon, near the left side of the holy cave, there were still nearly 100 ancient caves. They were still sealed by the power of the formation, and the people sleeping inside were all the upper echelons of the Hell Ant clan that had yet to emerge, as well as the bloodline ancestors. Chapter 3853. There was an ancient cave more than 2,000 meters away from the left side of the Abyss Wall Holy Cave. There was an immortal rank bloodline ancestor of the Hell Ant clan sleeping inside. Unfortunately, he had yet to be born. The experts of the Hell Ant clan couldn't even enter this ancient cave, let alone awaken the sleeping bloodline ancestor. The situation was basically the same for the hundreds of ancient caves on the left side of the Abyss Wall. The other ancient caves were still a bit far away and wouldn't be threatened by the rolling underworld flames from the left side of the Abyss Wall Holy Cave for the time being. However, this ancient cave, only 2,000 meters away, was extremely dangerous. The rolling underworld flames from the Abyss Wall Holy Cave were only 200 meters away from this ancient cave. With the momentum of the rising underworld flames from the Abyss Wall Holy Cave, this ancient cave would be enveloped in underworld flames in a short span of a dozen breaths. Then, the other hundreds of ancient caves would follow suit. Unless the rising underworld flames in the Abyss Wall Holy Cave were stopped, but that was obviously not realistic. At least, there were no signs of it happening right now. If the situation really developed to such a state, it would be tantamount to a disaster for the Hell Ant clan. The continuation of the clan's inheritance would face a huge challenge. The bloodline ancestor sleeping in these hundreds of ancient caves was the true foundation of their clan. If they were all destroyed, the Hell Ant clan would probably instantly become a small clan at the bottom of the rankings. They might even be forced to withdraw from the great stage of the first universe's struggle for supremacy. Every Hell Ant clan expert present was aware of the consequences, including Immortal. At this moment, he was so regretful that his intestines turned green. If he had known that the drop of all evil origin liquid would cause such serious consequences, he definitely wouldn't have done that. Now, he was so scared that his face was pale. Fortunately, the other Hell Ant clan experts around him were the same, so he wasn't afraid of being exposed. In fact, even Xianxia was a little dumbfounded at this moment. He had given a drop of all evil origin liquid to Immortal as a test, but he didn't expect it to actually work. Not only did it cause a change, but it also caused the underworld flames to surge. The aura was so terrifying. If he didn't have the farmer god cauldron in his hand, he would probably be shaking his head and smiling bitterly at this moment. Boom! Just as Xianxia and the other core higher-ups of the Hell Ant clan were like ants on a hot pan, helpless and scratching their ears and cheeks, a loud sound suddenly came from the depths of the canyon in front of them. Everyone's heart jumped at the same time, and their expressions changed again. In just a short while, the underworld flames that were burning in the deepest part of the Saint Cave had finally spread to the ancient cave abode closest to the Saint Cave. The might of the black nether flame was terrifying. As soon as it touched the entrance of the abode, it triggered the restriction. Moreover, it burned the restriction at the first possible moment. The thunderous explosion just now was precisely the sound that came from when the restriction at the entrance of the abode was destroyed. If the underworld flames his ancestor. At the same time, he leaped forward, intending to rush into the canyon and rescue the immortal bloodline ancestor in the ancient cave. The Hell Ant clan's patriarch, Xianxia, and the head clan's old ant tyrant saw that the situation wasn't good. They hurriedly pulled Blood Ant Sky back and tried to persuade him. Ancestor, you can't go. Even if you attack the restrictions in that cave with all your strength, you're still unable to shake them. Yet now, it was destroyed as soon as it came into contact with the nether flames, and it's sufficient to show the might of this flame. That's right. Even if you go, it would be of no use. Instead, you might even lose your life. Right now, our clan already has a sector lord level ancestor. You're the only one. You definitely cannot take the risk. Screech, right at this moment, a peerlessly miserable and vicious howl suddenly sounded out from within the ancient cave that had the restrictions at the entrance destroyed by the surging nether flames. In a short period of time, the black nether flames that destroyed the restrictions of the cave hadn't covered the entire area. Only half of the area was filled with rolling nether flames. Following the howl, a 300 tall figure charged out from within the ancient cave. He had already reached the cave entrance that was half covered by the nether flames. This was a blood-black Hell Ant warrior. The energy within his body wasn't stable. It was obvious that he had just been forcefully awoken from his slumber. Even so, the energy emitted from his body still far surpassed the sector Lord Old Monster Xianxia, an undying supreme being, even if he was forcefully awoken from his slumber and his strength hadn't recovered. However, he was still far from the sector Lord level. According to Yi Xian's estimation, this undying supreme being that was awoken from his slumber should have surpassed the sector Lord level, the level of the universe. The strength of the universe level was already extremely shocking. At least, whether it was the demon race, the space rat race, or the Hell Ant race, none of the bloodline ancestors that had been born were at the universe level. The sector Lord level was already the strongest. But now, the bloodline ancestor of the Hell Ant clan, who had been born in advance, and whose strength had dropped from undying to universe level, was in an extremely difficult situation in the face of the rolling flames that were rushing toward the ancient cave. After all, this kind of flames burst out from the remains of a desolate ancient underworld ant that was close to the level of a primordial great being, because its power was too strong. Although it did not seal the entire entrance of the ancient cave, it covered more than half of the area, leaving only a gap that was not affected by the netherworld flames. It was only a few hundred feet wide, which was not enough for the huge body of the Hell Ant clan bloodline ancestor to pass through. However, all of this couldn't be delayed any longer. In a few more breaths, the entire entrance of the cave would be sealed by the nether flames. Screech! At the critical moment, the black ant trapped in the cave let out a mournful howl again. Without any hesitation, its body suddenly rushed out, and in the blink of an eye, it was already outside the cave. However, the left half of its black armored body was already contaminated by the nether flames at the entrance of the cave, like a maggot attached to the bone, tightly clinging to it. In less than half a breath, a small part of the black armor melted, revealing the light golden flesh inside. Screech! A third vicious howl sounded out, and it revealed dense unwillingness and resentment. The enormous black ant took advantage of the fact that the nether flames hadn't penetrated its treasure body and hadn't spread out to actually swing its right limb in an extremely decisive manner, and it suddenly chopped down and directly chopped off a small portion of its body on the left. Then, it dragged its weak body, turned into a black arrow, and rushed to the right side of the wall that wasn't affected by the nether flames. With a wave of its hand, it opened up a new cave. After leaving behind a sentence, it dove in and continued to sleep to recover. Chapter 38:54. Boom! A loud bang resounded out once more. The ancient cave that was already completely empty was finally completely swallowed up by the surging nether flames, and even the abode collapsed. The thunderous explosion that resounded out caused all the absent-minded experts outside the gorge to be jolted awake. Following that, there was a large wave of exclamations and gasps that resounded at the entrance of the canyon. In less than 10 breaths of time, an immortal bloodline ancestor of the hellish ant clan was almost burned to death by the nether flames. Although he managed to survive, he was heavily injured. Half of his body was gone. He would need to hibernate for a longer period of time before he could be reborn in peak condition. To the Hell Ant clan, this was definitely a huge loss. Fortunately, it was still within an acceptable range. At least, this immortal rank ancestor didn't die. Jioming's face, which was originally as pale as a sheet of paper, seemed to have become a little warmer because of this. If an immortal bloodline ancestor from his clan were to be implicated and killed, it was likely that he would not feel good in his heart. However, after this battle, the experts of the Hell Ant clan outside the canyon had a clearer understanding of the terrifying power of the rolling underworld flames. Even the immortal rank ancestor couldn't withstand it. His hard black ant armor was instantly melted, and the light golden flesh inside could be seen. In the end, he was forced to endure the pain and cut off a small half of his body. Then, with just them, how could they face it? Even the Sector Lord Old Monster, Xianxia, who almost rushed into the canyon in a moment of impulse, didn't dare to take another step forward. Thinking back to his impulse just now, he felt a chill down his back and was extremely afraid. If he rushed over at that time, if these black underworld flames touched him, he would probably be burned to ashes on the spot. After all, these were underworld flames that burst out from the remains of an immortal ancestor. This immortal ancestor was the first-generation bloodline descendant of the desolate era almighty Nether Ant. Although the black flames in his body weren't true underworld flames, the difference was really very weak. The power was too terrifying. The wind helped the flames, whistling as they rose. In the blink of an eye, the cave dwelling that belonged to this immortal rank bloodline ancestor completely collapsed. Both inside and outside were filled with rolling underworld flames, completely drowned by the sea of flames. At this time, the black nether flames surging out from the cave on the left had reached a terrifying level. The entrance to the cave was no longer visible, drowned in the rolling nether flames. The netherworld flames that had rushed out of the cave had already spread out to a distance of 3,000 meters. The ancient cave that had just collapsed was only 2,000 meters away from the entrance of the holy cave. In the blink of an eye, the entrance was no longer visible as it was engulfed by the waves of underworld flames. Looking at the way it was spreading, not only was the power of the underworld flames still increasing, but its speed seemed to be increasing as well. If this continued, the fire would spread faster and faster, and in the end, the entire canyon would be turned into a sea of black flames. Even a nightmare wall on the right, which was thousands of miles away, was no longer safe. If it really developed to that extent, the holy cave on the right side of the abyss cliff would also be affected. At that time, the netherworld flames in the two holy caves would erupt, and the entire vast canyon would be completely destroyed. Along with it, the foundation of the Hell Ant clan and the hope of the clan's future would also be destroyed. Perhaps it would still take some time for the netherworld flames to develop to that extent. However, if they were helpless in the initial stage of the fire, what could they do when the fire spread completely? Moreover, there was a new danger that was about to befall them. About 4,000 meters away from the back section of the Abyss Cliff Holy Cave on the left side, there were 3 ancient caves from bottom to top. The immortal rank ancestors of the Hell Ant race were all hibernating in these 3 caves. Right now, the rolling nether flames that were spreading from the Holy Cave were only about 1,000 meters away from these 3 ancient caves. Judging from the way the nether flames were spreading, these 3 ancient caves would be completely covered in the time it took to drink a cup of tea. This time, they definitely wouldn't be as lucky as last time. Even if only one of the 3 slumbering, imperishable old ancestors died, it was still a huge blow to the Hell Ant tribe that was absolutely unbearable. This can't go on. The back area of the left side of the Abyss Cliff has 40 ancient caves. All of them are Sector Lord level upper echelons and bloodline ancestors. If we allow the nether flames to continue spreading, our Hell Ant clan's losses will be too great. While still in shock, the Hell Ant clan's Sector Lord, Old Monster, Xianxia's expression sunk again. He muttered to himself, "No, we have to think of a way. We have to at least stop the spreading of the nether flames, and then find a way to force the nether flames back to the left holy cave." Indeed, they had to force the nether flames back to the left holy cave. Otherwise, the one drop of nether liquid would be completely wasted. The entire cave entrance was already covered in nether flames and couldn't be approached at all. How could they collect the nether liquid? However, this was easy to say, but not so easy to do. While Xianxia was muttering to himself, the Hell Ant clan's patriarch Yitsong and elder Iba were all looking at each other. They couldn't think of a way to solve this problem and couldn't help but sigh bitterly. The power of the underworld flame is too terrifying. Even the ant armor of the immortal realm old ancestor couldn't withstand it and was melted in an instant. Judging from this power, it would take at least a primordial supreme treasure to enter. And it can't be an ordinary desolate level treasure. I'm afraid it has to be at the level of a desolate level treasure. For example, a nether furnace or right, doesn't young Master Linghu have a Shinnon cauldron? That's right, we can ask young Master Linghu for help. At least we can try. If it really doesn't work, then there's no other way. This is fate. Following these discussions, Yixian's heart shook, and he almost couldn't hold back his laughter. At this moment, he was still thinking of how to open his mouth without arousing suspicion. He didn't expect that before he could think of a way to open his mouth, the other party would suddenly come knocking on his door. This was simply too perfect. Little friend Linghu, this matter concerns the entire foundation of my Hell Ant clan. It's not a small matter. Please help us. Just as he was muttering in his heart, the Hell Ant clan's sector lord, Xianxia, was alerted by the discussions, and his eyes suddenly lit up. He turned to look at Yixian. There was even a hint of pleading in his tone. "Young friend, you and I are allies now. Although this nether flame is indeed terrifying, among all of us, you're the only one who possesses a primordial treasure of the ancients." Chapter 38:55. At this moment, everyone's gazes converged on Yixian. The power of the farmer god cauldron in young Master Linghu's hand was well known. It was said that even a realm lord could not force his way out if he was trapped inside. Although this had not been proven, not long ago, this cauldron had indeed trapped hundreds of millions of experts from various races in the 3 dimensions. Among them were 8 realm lords. Even the combined attack of 8 realm lords could not break through the power of this cauldron's inner domain. It was obvious how terrifying this cauldron's power was. In fact, the farmer god cauldron had shone brightly in the source of all evil star domain. Young Master Linghu stood on top of the cauldron, his body shrouded by the 9-colored fog. Even the pressure of the realm lords could not affect him in the slightest. Later on, he relied on this cauldron to rescue millions of battleships from various races and millions of native ferocious beasts. From this point of view, it was not entirely impossible for the farmer god cauldron to resist the power of the underworld flames. This isn't too good, right? Although he was overjoyed, Yixian did not show it on his face. Instead, a troubled expression appeared on his face as he tactfully declined. The canyon ahead is the holy land of your race. Although this young master and your race are allies now, it is not easy to enter a place like the holy land of a race. In addition, if we want to investigate the cause of the underworld flames, we have to get close to the entrance of the holy cave. There's the remains of a noble race's underworld ancestor inside. If it was any other time, it would be fine, but now the entire area is shrouded in black flames. It is difficult to see clearly. This young master's farmer god cauldron is a precious artifact. If we accidentally knock into it and break the remains of the noble race's underworld ancestor, that would be a great sin. After all, Yixian was well aware that as long as he took out the Shinnon cauldron and entered, the remains of the nether ancestor in the sacred cave on the left side of the cave would definitely not be left behind. He would be kept in the Shinnon cauldron, and at that time, he would refuse to admit it no matter what. After all, Yixian was well aware that as long as he took out the Shinnon cauldron and entered, the remains of the nether ancestor in the sacred cave on the left side of the cauldron would definitely not be left behind. He would claim that the remains had spontaneously combusted and that it was burned clean. However, this matter had to be mentally prepared in advance. Otherwise, it would have a bad effect on the alliance that had just been formed. Unfortunately, no one had thought of this plan, except for the Tao Child of the Hell Ants, Yi Jiuming. To the core higher-ups of the Hell Ants, including the Realm Lord Old Monster Yi Xueqiong, Yixian was clearly making excuses. Although it sounded good, it was actually because he was afraid that the underworld flames would be too strong and damage the farmer god cauldron in his hands. If it were any other time, all of the higher-ups of the ant race of hell present here were not shameless people, so they naturally wouldn't continue to insist. However, the current crisis had to be resolved. No matter how important it was, as long as there was a glimmer of hope, they had to fight for it. Thinking of this, the Realm Lord Old Monster Yi Xueqiong made up his mind and gritted his teeth. Little friend, just give it a try. If the giant cauldron cannot withstand the power of the underworld flames, this matter will naturally be dropped. Otherwise, if it can withstand it, I hope that little friend will lend a hand. At this point, a bitter smile appeared on Yi Xueqiong's face. He shook his head and said, "In fact, the underworld ancestors' remains in the holy cave on the left side of the cliff wall suddenly had such a change. Even if little friend is careful not to touch it, I'm afraid we won't be able to protect it. The top priority is to protect the dozens of ancient caves on the left side of the cliff wall. We can't let the underworld flames continue to spread. Otherwise, my clan will be in danger. So it's like that. The other party had already said so much. If he still didn't agree, it would really affect the alliance that had just been established." Yixian didn't plan to continue to make things difficult, and a difficult expression appeared on his face. In the end, he sighed helplessly. "All right, no matter what, this young master and the Hell Ants are already allies. The crisis in front of us is indeed not a small matter. Who asked me to have the farmer god cauldron in my hands? Since Senior has already said so much, if I don't lend a hand, I will lose face. However, I have to make things clear first. The power of the underworld flames is too terrifying. This young master can only take out the farmer god cauldron and try to see if it can withstand it. If it can't withstand it, even if the giant cauldron is slightly damaged, I will definitely not agree to this. Senior also knows that this farmer god cauldron can help me through several times. To help me get through this life and death crisis, to this young master, it can't be lost. Of course, hearing that Xian was willing to help, the realm master Old Monster Ant Blood Dome heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly agreed. Then, he looked at Xian anxiously and didn't say anything, waiting for him to immediately take out the heavy cauldron and try it out. In just a short while, the underworld flames at the back of the canyon had spread by a large amount. They were only 300 to 400 meters away from the 3 rows of ancient caves. Time was too tight. Swish! Xian did not delay any longer. He immediately waved his hand and took out the Farmer God Cauldron, keeping it at a size of 300 meters. He stepped into it and stood on top of the cauldron, protected by the 9-colored mist. Then, he controlled the giant cauldron beneath his feet and slowly moved towards the depths of the canyon. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived at the edge of the area where the underworld flames were surging. Although Xian was confident in the Farmer God Cauldron, because the cauldron itself contained a 9-colored strange flame, its power definitely surpassed this kind of black underworld flame. However, after all, the power of the Farmer God Cauldron was restricted by Xian's own strength. Currently, it was far from being fully activated, and the Farmer God Cauldron had only grown to a 3-colored flame. Therefore, even Xian was somewhat nervous at this moment. However, reality quickly proved that his nervousness was unnecessary. After reaching the edge of the black underworld flame area, Xian immediately let one side of the giant cauldron come into contact with a small plume of underworld flame. Even the 9-colored mist released a strand of underworld flame to test the power of the underworld flame. In the end, there was no reaction. As expected, the black underworld flame was unable to shake the Farmer God Cauldron at all. Seeing this scene, the entrance of the canyon in the distance immediately erupted with thunderous cheers. The core members of the Hell Ant clan, waiting at the front of the canyon, all heaved a sigh of relief. At least now, they saw hope. As long as they could enter the holy cave on the left side of the cliff and investigate the reason for the explosion of the underworld flame, they would have a chance to find a solution. Thinking of this, the realm master Old Monster Ant Xiong smiled and cupped his fists towards Xian from afar. He said in a clear voice, "Thank you, little friend, for your help." Chapter 3856. The underworld flames could even burn divine sense, so after entering the Sea of Flames, no one could investigate the situation of the Farmer God Cauldron, not even the Sector Lord-level Hell Ant. Therefore, Xian didn't pretend anymore. Instead, he activated the Farmer God Cauldron at extreme speed. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of the Holy Cauldron on the left and charged in. Amidst the rolling netherworld flames, a humongous giant ant that was 10,000 feet tall entered his sight. The entire holy cavern was filled with black netherworld flames, and these netherworld flames were surging out from this netherworld ancestor's remains. This was also the result of Xian's deduction using the devouring system in his body. Xian had already come into contact with the Hell Ant elixir, and the devouring system had also analyzed it, leaving behind comprehensive data. Therefore, when Xian ordered the devouring system to find a resource that could cause the underworld flames on the surface of a high-grade Hell Ant to erupt in a small area, the system's deduction was made. The result was the all-evil elixir. However, it didn't say how much to use, so Xian naturally gave the Heaven and Earth Dao child ant Juming a drop. Now, it seemed that this was too much. Half a drop would be enough, and the commotion it caused would be enough to alarm the entire Hell Ant tribe. Fortunately, there wasn't any unforeseen accident, or else Xian wouldn't even have a place to cry. The Holy Cauldron was big enough. Xian activated the Farmer God Cauldron under his feet, causing it to expand to more than 100,000 feet. Then, a huge cloud of 9-colored fog surged out, sucking the underworld ancestors' remains into the Farmer God Cauldron. It was directly sent to the storage area at the bottom of the volcano in the central region. This way, even if the underworld ancestors' remains were still surging with underworld flames, it was in an independent cauldron, and the underworld flames couldn't burn it out, so there wouldn't be any other damage. At this moment, as the underworld ancestors' remains were taken away, the rolling underworld flames that had been spreading out in the second half of the vast canyon immediately stopped spreading. After all of the black underworld flames had surged out from the remains of the ancestor of the underworld. Now that the source had been taken away, even if the underworld flames that had spread out still existed, their momentum had been completely cut off. It was impossible for them to continue spreading. At this moment, the black underworld flames that were spreading out from the holy cauldron were only 100 meters away from the 3 ancient cauldrons that were lined up in a row. But he stopped the spread of the underworld flames directly. My brother is amazing. Fortunately, young Master Linghu suddenly visited our clan this time. Otherwise, I'm afraid our ancestral land would not be safe today. The power of the underworld flames is too terrifying. Fortunately, although the underworld flames still exist, at least they are no longer dangerous to the dozens of ancient cauldrons on the left side. There will be a way to get rid of them later. It's a close call. Fortunately, the crisis this time is finally over. As these exclamations sounded, the core members of the Hell Ant clan, standing in the front area of the canyon, all heaved a long sigh of relief, and their hearts that were in their throats were half relieved. Only Grandpa, Imo Qigong, and the head of the spatial rat clan, Mouse Qiansui, looked at each other with worried expressions on their faces. Yi Xian had just entered, but the underworld flames that had been spreading and spreading fiercely suddenly stopped spreading. This truly caused them to they were worried. They were afraid that Yi Xian had encountered some kind of accident inside. The 3 of you don't need to worry. Little friend Linghu should be fine. The Hell Ant Clan Sector Lord Old Monster Yi Xueqiong smiled faintly. He turned to look at Grand Elder Mo and the other 2 and comforted them. You saw it just now. Little friend's Farmer God Heavy Cauldron is not afraid of the underworld flames at all. With the cauldron's protection, there should be no problem in terms of safety. If I'm not mistaken, the reason why the underworld flame has stopped spreading should be because my little friend discovered the problem. Furthermore, with the help of the Farmer God's Heavy Cauldron's power, he has resolved the problem. Therefore, according to my guess, my little friend Linghu should be coming out soon. Saying this, Yi Xueqiong stroked his beard and laughed happily. Ha ha. It seems at this time, the heavens are really blessing my Hell Ant clan. If you didn't coincidentally come to my clan, I'm afraid it would be very difficult for my clan to survive this crisis. Little friend Linghu has the most credit for this matter. This old man will definitely reward you greatly later. Grandpa Mo and the other 2 looked at each other and could only bitterly smile as they dealt with it. However, their gazes were locked onto the area of the underworld flame that had stopped expanding. They eagerly awaited Yi Xian's return as soon as possible. Black underworld flames area, inside the holy cauldron on the left side of the wall. Under Yi Xian's control, the Farmer God Cauldron had shrunk again. This time, it was only about 30 meters in size. He had originally planned to leave immediately, but considering that he had only been here for a short time, he decided to dawdle for a while. In his boredom, Yi Xian's attention was attracted by the black underworld flames rolling like waves inside the holy cauldron. His heart suddenly moved. These black flames that were close to true underworld flames were clearly extraordinary. Although they couldn't compare to the Farmer God Heavenly Flames. What if the Farmer God Heavenly Flames absorbed them? Was it possible to directly upgrade the Farmer God Heavenly Flames from the current 3-colored flames to 4-colored flames? As soon as this idea appeared, Yi Xian's spirit was greatly roused. Without hesitation, he immediately took action. Regardless of whether this idea of 4-colored flames was feasible or not, at least these underworld flames would be useful in the end. Moreover, the Farmer God Cauldron could completely absorb them. Of course, even if it wanted to absorb them, it couldn't absorb all the black underworld flames in the canyon. If it did that, the experts of the Hell Ant Clan outside the entrance of the canyon could immediately enter the back of the canyon to check the situation. The excuse Yi Xian had thought of was that when he entered the sea of black flames and approached the entrance of the Holy Cauldron, he found that only a small part of the underworld ancestor's body was left. The other parts had all turned into rolling underworld flames. Chapter 38:57. Apart from the fact that it would take some time to burn the remains of the ancestor of the underworld, Yixian would also need some time to destroy the remaining remains of the ancestor of the underworld with the help of the farmer god cauldron and stop the spreading of the underworld flame. Apart from time, he also needed to make some noise. Then I'll just have to stay in this sea of underworld flame for half a day. I'll collect the underworld flame and make some noise. Yixian grinned as he muttered to himself. At least I have to let the people outside know that I didn't do nothing after I came in. I've put in a lot of effort to help the Hell Ant tribe. Thinking like this, Yixian immediately activated the power of the Shinnon cauldron. With the dense 9-colored fog at the mouth of the cauldron, he condensed it into a huge fist and fiercely smashed it towards the wall of the holy cave. Rumble. A loud rumbling sound rang out as the entire second half of the canyon trembled slightly. Although the walls of the Saint Cave were special, after being burned by the underworld flames for countless years, they had long been purified. It was as if they had been refined into magic treasures, leaving behind only the toughest essence. However, with this punch, a corner of the wall on one side of the Saint Cavern still crumbled. The commotion was sufficient. Yixian nodded in satisfaction. Then, he left the attack and activated the power of the farmer god cauldron to collect the black underworld flame in the holy cave. After the underworld flame was collected into the farmer god cauldron, it was directly sent to another sealed cave at the bottom of the volcano in the central region. Its power did not spread out. After a while, Yixian stopped collecting the underworld flame. He used the 9-colored fog at the mouth of the cauldron to form a fist and smashed it towards the wall of the holy cave. Once again, a loud noise was heard and rocks rolled down the wall. Then, he stopped and continued to collect the underworld flame. Just like this, Yixian controlled the power of the Shinnon cauldron. He condensed a fist imprint and smashed it into the mountain wall, then collected the underworld flame. He was extremely busy, and time slowly passed as he repeated this process. Outside the entrance of the canyon, there was already an uproar. Not long ago, the underworld flames that had been continuously spreading outwards finally stopped spreading, causing everyone to heave a sigh of relief. However, immediately after, the underworld flames still surged in front of them, but in the depths of the sea of black flames that had stopped spreading outwards, a huge trembling sound rang out. This rumble was very sudden, causing everyone to be greatly surprised. What was even worse was that this wasn't the only rumble. Every few breaths of time, another rumble would ring out, causing the hearts of the experts waiting outside the canyon to pound. As they looked at each other, their expressions became more and more anxious. They didn't know what was happening near the Saint Cave in the depths of the Sea of Flames. Fortunately, during this process, young Master Linghu had successfully stopped the underworld flame from spreading. It could be said that this was a great fortune amidst all the misfortune. It wasn't until half a day later that a huge rumble rang out every 10 breaths of time that it finally stopped. Everyone once again heaved a sigh of relief. They all raised their heads in the depths of the canyon that was still surging with flames, anticipating the return of young Master Linghu, especially Grandpa Mo and the other two. At this moment, they were already burning with anxiety. On the side, several higher-ups of the Hell Ant clan were repeatedly comforting them. At the same time, outside the Saint Cave on the left side of the canyon, Yixian was still standing at the mouth of the Farmer God Cauldron. The dense 9-colored fog protected his body, preventing the black underworld flames in the surrounding void from invading him. Now, he had already stopped bombarding the Saint Cave on the left side of the mountain. A large area of the entrance of the Saint Cave had already collapsed. It was completely enough for him to act to this extent. As for the ocean-like underworld flames in the Saint Cave, they had long been collected by Yixian with the Farmer God Cauldron. Now, only the void outside the Saint Cave was left with black underworld flames that shrouded about 3,000 meters in diameter. Yi Xian had no intention of collecting the underworld flames outside the Saint Cave at all. Letting them burn in the outside world would give the Hell Ant clan a headache for a while. However, this problem would definitely be solved in the end. However, that would probably be at least a matter of a few days. Such a long time would be enough for the underworld ancestors' remains in the Saint Cave to be completely burned. At that time, even if the higher-ups of the Hell Ant clan who were outside the canyon entered the Saint Cave and did not see any remains, they should not be suspicious anymore. As for walking out of the underworld flames area, Yi Xian planned to wait a little longer. Taking advantage of this time, he could try to see if he could use the underworld flames to fuse with the underworld flames to upgrade the Farmer God Cauldron's 3-colored flames to the level of 4-colored flames. Soon, Yi Xian entered the Farmer God Cauldron and appeared in the space inside the cauldron. At the Central Territory's volcanic area, the primeval porcupine and primeval tortoise led the millions of native ferocious beasts that were the source of all evil. They were still within the cauldron, and some of them were at the periphery of the Central Territory's volcanoes and were relying on the pillars of flames around the volcanoes to roast their meat. The 8 guardian deities had become familiar with these native ferocious beasts since a long time ago. At this moment, they were respectively staying by the side of the 2 region lords, and they were trying their best to curry favor with them. Fellow ferocious beasts, stop for a moment after you're done roasting the meat in your hands. This young master has some proper business to attend to. Yi Xian had no choice but to show himself and call out to them. Besides that, this matter might be slightly dangerous. So, it's best that all my fellow ferocious beasts retreat to a slightly further area. After a short while, all the native ferocious beasts had retreated from the Central Territory's volcanoes under the command of the primeval porcupine and primeval tortoise, and they lay dormant in the mountain ranges and the surroundings while eagerly paying attention to the developments here. The Saint Cave was extremely vast. When Yi Xian entered, the space within the cave was completely filled with surging nether flames, and it was like an ocean of flames. On the other hand, all of these black nether flames that were enormous like an ocean had been placed within the Farmer God Cauldron, and he'd opened up an independent sealed-off cave at the bottom of the Central Territory's volcanoes to store them. Now, all he had to do was guide these black nether flames into the central pool of flames at the bottom of the Central Territory's volcanoes. He hoped that he could facilitate them to fuse into the Farmer God tricolored flames and complete the advancement of the Farmer God flames from the tricolored flames to the quad-colored flames. The entire process progressed very quickly. After all, the independent cave where these black nether flames were stored was at the bottom of the Central Territory's volcanoes. With just a thought, Yi Xian activated the internal domain of the Farmer God Cauldron and guided all of them into the central pool of flames at the bottom of the Central Territory's volcanoes. In just a short minute or so, all of the black nether flames in the independent cave had been guided into the central pool of flames at the bottom of the Central Territory's volcanoes. Rumble. From this moment on, a series of muffled, thunderous sounds began to appear, and the power of the flames in the central pool of flames instantly increased. The majestic tricolored flames that were as vast as the sea and the slightly smaller amount of black nether flames began to fuse with each other, appearing and disappearing from time to time. At this moment, Yi Xian's heart was in his throat. He was deeply afraid that the fusion this time would fail. If that happened, it would definitely be a huge blow to him. Chapter 3858. Ding! Congratulations to the host. The level of the Shinong Strange Flame has increased. Current level, 4-colored flame. Ding! Congratulations to the host. The level of the physical body's chi and blood has increased. Current level, 3rd order cosmic light. As the familiar system prompt sounded in his mind, Yi Xian immediately fell into a daze. What's going on? The Shinong Strange Flame had leveled up from the previous 3-colored flame to the current 4-colored flame. This was something that was expected, but his physical body realm had also increased by a small level. What was going on? After thinking for a while, Yi Xian couldn't find an answer and felt a little confused. In the end, he could only attribute this matter to the frequent use of the Shinong Cauldron's power this time. Just bombarding the sacred cave in the back of the canyon took a long time, and it might be that his physical body's chi and blood had been completely activated. Some of the heavenly materials and earthly treasures that remained in his body had been completely absorbed. However, this was a good thing. What was important was the result, so there was no need to get to the bottom of it. After putting this matter aside, Yi Xian's attention quickly shifted to the Shenong strange flame in the central flame pool at the bottom of the volcano in the central region. With a thought, tens of thousands of Shenong strange flames of different sizes rushed out from the flame pillar channel he had opened at the edge of the volcano in the central region, instantly illuminating the vast space inside the cauldron with incomparable brilliance. Compared to the previous three-colored flame, the current Shenong strange flame had an additional touch of black. This was the color of the nether flame. Although it was black, the current strange flame had an additional color after all. The degree of brilliance was by no means comparable to before, causing people to be dazzled. Illo! Screech! As these tens of thousands of four-colored flame pillars of varying sizes rushed out from the edge of the volcano in the central region, in the distant mountains at the edge of the volcano, there were instantly cheerful roars and howls of fierce beasts. All the indigenous fierce beasts were paying close attention to the progress of the volcano in the central region. Seeing that Yi Xian had upgraded the original three-colored flame to the current four-colored flame in a short period of time, they were all overjoyed. They had been roasting meat in the internal space of the Shenong cauldron for a long time, so they had a deep understanding of the mysterious power of the Shenong tricolor flame. Just the tricolor flame alone was able to roast ordinary meat into a meat medicine. Now that the exotic flame had advanced again from the tricolor flame to the current quadruple flame, its power had obviously increased as well. For the local ferocious beasts who could roast meat with the Shenong flames of the central domain's volcanoes, they were obviously the direct beneficiaries of the improvement of the level of the flames. How could they not be overjoyed? Amidst the cheering, a large number of native beasts in the rolling mountain range in the distance, under the lead of the primordial porcupine and primordial tortoise, all rushed towards the volcano in the central region. Some of the ferocious beasts were still on the way, but they had already taken out large and small amounts of fresh meat from their storage treasures in a panic. The Shenong flames had successfully advanced, and they couldn't wait to personally experience the magical colors of this four-colored flame. They wanted to taste the meat roasted with it and see how delicious it was and how powerful its effect was. Yi Xian was still thinking about the things in the canyon outside the cauldron, so he didn't want to stay any longer. Seeing that all the native beasts were swarming over, he left the space inside the cauldron. When he arrived at the outside world, the billowing flames in the void outside the holy cave were still there. It was quiet all around, and no one had entered during this period. Yi Xian had only entered the internal space of the Shenong cauldron in the time it took to eat a meal. Counting carefully, it had been nearly half a day since he first entered this sea of flames. He didn't waste any more time and immediately activated the Shenong cauldron, rushing towards the front of the canyon at the edge of the sea of flames. Very quickly, he rushed out of the black sea of flames and appeared in the vision of the experts who had been waiting at the front of the canyon and the entrance. At this moment, Grandpa Mo, Mo Qigong, and the chief of the Space Rat clan, Shu Qian Sui, all let out a sigh of relief. If something really happened to Yi Xian this time, it would be difficult to clean up the aftermath. The newly formed alliance would most likely collapse very quickly. After all, without his existence, the five-sector Lord-level Gold Elders who had already entered the alliance would most likely not be able to gather into a single force. Similarly, the upper echelons of the Hell Ant clan also let out a sigh of relief. If Yi Xian met with misfortune in the Hell Ant clan this time, they would also be unable to escape responsibility and would most likely immediately start a war. With smiles on their faces, the group of experts all rushed forward to welcome him. A tired expression appeared on Yi Xian's face as he waved his hand and stored the Shenong cauldron into his body. Then, he cupped his fists towards the core members of the Hell Ant clan. Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you. In the end, I still managed to resolve this crisis, but Sai, the remains of the noble nether ancestor were not left behind. Today, only a few fragments of the remains remain. Because there are still black flames rising from them, I was unable to bring them out. Hearing this, the core members of the Hell Ant clan were all startled. Then they asked about the situation inside the Saint Cave. Xian followed the explanation that he had already thought of before and narrated it flawlessly. In the end, he said, out of helplessness, this young master could only activate the power of the Shinnong Cauldron and launch another bombardment. In the end, it took half a day before I finally shattered half of the noble nether ancestors' remains and completely disintegrated them. The aftermath of the nether flame. After that, I waited inside for a period of time until the fragments of the remains were almost burnt. After confirming that there would be no more accidents, I left. The core members of the Hell Ant clan did not doubt Yi Xian's explanation. After all, everything was reasonable. Moreover, they had indeed heard a loud rumbling sound that lasted for half a day. Everything happened to corroborate each other. There was no discrepancy. Sai, it is indeed a pity. However, this old man had already expected this. The two nether ancestors' remains of our clan have existed for countless years, and there is not much energy left in their bodies. This time, due to some unforeseen event, the nether ancestors' remains in the left side of the abyss wall holy cave burst out with such a large amount of nether flame. Under such circumstances, it would be unreasonable if the nether ancestors' remains could continue to be preserved. After all, energy is conserved. When the water runs out, the source will naturally run out. It's a pity that our clan will lose a source of nether liquid from now on. This kind of resource cannot be found anywhere else in the world. It's really a pity. Chapter 38:59. In a short period of a single day, the matter with the Hellish Ant clan had been resolved perfectly. Not only had he succeeded in forming an alliance with the Hellish Ant clan, but he'd even sent the universe Daoist child of the Hellish Ant clan who'd surrendered to Yi Xian back to the Hellish Ant clan as a spy. Moreover, Yi Xian had even obtained the remains of a first-generation nether ant that was almost at the level of a great figure from the primordial era. Besides that, his own cultivation had broken through to the third rank of the cosmic realm in one go, and it was even to the extent that the farmer god cauldron's three-colored flames had advanced once more to become four-colored flames that possessed formidable might. Compared to all of this, in order to thank Yi Xian for his help, the 100 drops of underworld liquid and the 100 drops of hellish ant liquid that were secreted from his own body, which was the hellish ant liquid secreted by the sector lord level hellish ant, seemed a little insignificant. In fact, merely these 100 drops of nether elixir and 100 drops of high-grade hellish ant elixir were priceless in the outside world, and they were priceless. In short, Yi Xian hadn't mobilized a single soldier during his trip to the Hellish Ant clan, yet his gains were so great that even he hadn't expected it. It was simply an enormous, pleasant surprise. After staying in the Hellish Ant clan for a day, the subjugation army set out once more. Besides the army of 10 million battleships and 4 million troops from the Spatial Mouse clan, the Hellish Ant clan had gathered an army of almost 4 million this time. At the same time, they dispatched their head elder, Ant Ba, who was at the Region Lord realm to command their fleet. At this point, the allied army of the three clans had arrived at almost 20 million battleships, and there were even 2 Region Lords amongst them. As for the next target, Yi Xian pondered deeply for a moment before he decided to attack the ferocious Ant clan. On one hand, the universe Daoist of the ferocious Ant clan really should be sent back to his clan because he was a spy that would definitely be of great use in the future. On the other hand, amongst the 9 gold members of the alliance, 5 had already arrived while the 6th had already been decided, and it belonged to the native ferocious Beast clan. There were only 3 gold member slots left. Since he already had a spy in the giant ferocious tribe, then no matter what, he had to get a gold member for the tribe. As for who the final 2 gold members would end up in, Yi Xian did not care. He did not care at all. However, this time, Yi Xian didn't plan to personally lead the expedition against the giant ferocious tribe. Although his departure represented the loss of a powerful force, after all, The entire native ferocious beast race was in the farmer god cauldron, including the two old monsters, the primordial porcupine and the primordial hairy tortoise. If Yixian did not go, the native ferocious beasts would not participate in the subsequent expeditions. But now, the expedition army was close to 20 million, and there were two powerful old monsters at the domain lord level. They should be able to deal with the other races that weren't in the top 3 of the first universe. Whether or not Yixian personally went into battle with the army did not matter anymore. He had more important things to deal with, and that was the root of all evil. Ever since they had left the star field of the root of all evil, none of the top forces of the 3 universes had entered that star field. They hadn't even sent out a single scout. They were really scared. The two old monsters at the domain lord level of the native ferocious beasts were killed in a single round. This was absolutely terrifying. The top powers of the 3 universes still had lingering fear in their hearts. They hadn't recovered from their shock yet and didn't dare to go over. However, Yixian was different. He was still worried about this matter and felt uneasy. He had to personally make a trip. The day after the decision was made, Yixian handed Meng Mas Han, the universe Tao child of the giant ferocious tribe, to Grandpa Mo and left by himself. Half a day later, a terrifying army of close to 20 million warships of various types set off from the underworld ant star field where the Hell Ant tribe was located. They set off for the giant ferocious star field where the giant ferocious tribe was located. When the news spread, all the races of the first universe were in an uproar. The demon tribe, the space rat tribe, and the Hell Ant tribe were the top 3 races of the first universe. They were very powerful, and now they had joined forces and gathered an army of close to 20 million warships to set off against the giant ferocious tribe. This was clearly to conquer the entire first universe and trample on the other races. The rhythm of their footsteps. The Tianji tribe's position as the overlord of the first universe had just been ended, and now the demon tribe had come. This was absolutely intolerable for the other races. Even if the new overlord was not the demon tribe alone, but was jointly controlled by the demon tribe, the space rat tribe, and the hell ant tribe. However, to the other slaves of the first universe, there was almost no difference. No matter what kind of agreement the demon tribe, the space rat tribe, and the hell ant tribe had reached, once all the races of the first universe were subdued by the army of these 3 races, only these 3 races would be the ones to truly control the power. No other race could be on equal footing with them. The status of the top 3 races of the first universe was not on the same level as the other slave races. Just this point alone was destined to be the general trend once the entire first universe was unified again. The demon tribe, the space rat tribe, and the hell ant tribe would be in charge, and all the other weaker races would be enslaved again. Such a situation was obviously unacceptable to the other slave races. If it was said that young Master Linghu had joined forces with the demon tribe to build an army of tens of millions of warships and set off to suppress the space rat tribe, the races of the first universe did not take it seriously. They always felt that even if the sky collapsed, there was still a head to hold it up. With the space rat tribe and the hell ant tribe in front of them, they did not have to worry about it at all. They did not have to worry about this so-called alliance army of tens of millions. Then, with the space rat tribe and the hell ant tribe being incorporated or pulled into the alliance by the demon tribe, the top 3 races of the first universe were completely twisted into a force. At this time, the other higher-ups of the slave races finally panicked. For a time, as the alliance army of the 3 races of nearly 20 million warships set off from the hell ant tribe's nest in the nether ant star field, the other slave races of the first universe made a sound one after another, calling for the other races to unite and resist the alliance army of the 3 races together. The demon tribe, the space rat tribe, and the hell ant tribe were indeed powerful. It was not an undeserved reputation to be known as the top 3 races of the first universe. Not to mention the alliance army of the 3 races. Even if the army of any of the 3 races led a crusade against any of the slave races other than the top 3, there was almost no possibility of defeat. However, if all the other slave races in the first universe, except for the top 3 races, were to gather together and work together to fight against the foreign enemy, then it would be a different story. There were thousands of slave races of various sizes in the first universe. The weak ones might only have one administrative planet, and the strong ones' overall combat power was not too far away from the top 3 races, such as the giant ferocious tribe. Chapter 3860. With the establishment of the alliance of 10,000 races, the first universe was instantly filled with the flames of war. There were 2 opposing camps. On one side were the demon people, space rats, and hell ants, the top 3 races in the first universe. On the other side were all the slave races in the first universe other than the top 3 races. The total number of races, big and small, was close to 3,000. When this so-called alliance of 10,000 races was established, it had been 5 days since the army of 20 million battleships of the 3 races set off from the Netherant star field and headed for the ferocious star field, the ancestral land of the ferocious star field. Although all the allied countries of the alliance of 10,000 races began to mobilize their battleships immediately after the establishment of the alliance, the huge allied army of the 3 races was only a day's journey away from the ferocious star field. Even if all the races of the alliance of 10,000 races immediately sent out their troops and wanted to help the ferocious star field, it was too late. Under such circumstances, the ferocious star field, who had always bullied the weak and feared the strong, was the most sensible and could even be said to be a fence-sitter. They made a prompt decision and directly withdrew from the alliance of 10,000 races. They only stayed in this newly established alliance for a day before they welcomed them with a smile and hugged the thick thighs of the 3 races of the demon race. The ferocious star field was actually quite powerful. Among the slave races of the first universe, the demons, space rats, and hell ants were the top 3 races. Below the top 3 races were dozens of first-class races, and the ferocious star field was one of them. Moreover, it was one of the leading races among them. If not for this, Xianxia would not have been interested in this race. Even if he gave him a universe Taoist for free, Xianxia might not even raise his eyes. But now, apart from the demons, space rats, hell ants, mosquito beasts, and the indigenous fierce beasts that had already joined the alliance, as well as the 6 forces represented by the old devil mosquito butcher of Triumph City, the alliance of 9 gold members still needed 3 more races to join. In any case, the peach was given to anyone. Seeing that the ferocious star field had a universe Taoist, Meng Mashan, as a spy, and was very likely to fully control this race in the future, before Xianxia left, he had already decided on the last 3 gold members, leaving 1 for the ferocious star field. The last 2 were not in a hurry. They would go on expeditions one after another until they found a suitable one. During this period, any tribe that joined the alliance could only become a silver member at most. In other words, in the future, Xianxia would have to choose the best of all the other silver members to recruit the last 2 gold members. These situations, including the general structure of the alliance, were all revealed by Grand Elder Mo and the other higher-ups of the alliance when they met with the Sector Lord Old Monsters of the giant ferocious race. Furthermore, Xianxia had prepared a cubic meter of netherworld furnace lotion and a cubic meter of 9-colored meat paste. When Feng Lu was in his hands, he found out that the identity of the Gold Elder was already the 7th in the alliance. Although there were still 2 more, they wouldn't easily give it to a certain race. The Sector Lord Old Monster of the giant ferocious race was so happy that he couldn't stop laughing. Originally, he thought that this time he was once again a fence-sitter. Under the tyrannical power of the 5 Sector Lord Old Monsters of the demon race, he betrayed the alliance of 10,000 races and turned to hug the thighs of the 3 races. The final result would definitely be the same as before under the command of the Tianji race. Enslaved, but the reality was so beautiful. Of the 9 gold members of the alliance, aside from the 2 that were temporarily undecided, the last 7 were actually obtained by the giant ferocious race. In the future, not only would they be able to sit on equal footing with the demon race and the other top 3 races, even his own Feng Lu as a Sector Lord Old Ancestor was so happy. All of this, to the Sector Lord Old Monster of the giant ferocious race, was like a pie falling from the sky. In order to express their gratitude, the entire giant ferocious race cried out in excitement after joining the Alliance. As a first-rate race in the first universe, they were actually like the space rats and hell ants in the top 3. They gathered an army of 4 million battleships and appointed a domain Lord Old Monster to lead them and join the Alliance. The 3-race allied army once again began to move. At this point, of the 9 gold members of the Alliance, 7 of them were already taken. The final 2 wouldn't be easily decided. The final selection, right, was in the hands of Xianxia. And after this, the original 20 million battleships of the 3-race army became 22 million battleships of the 4-race army, majestically charging toward the next first-rate race of the first universe, the Ash Wolf race. And at this time, the fleets of the other allied nations of the 10,000 Race Alliance were all gathered in the Ash Wolf star field. The giant ferocious race's sudden change in allegiance made them furious. This time, the 10,000 Race Alliance was determined to defeat the 20 million battleships of the 4-Race Alliance. The era of total war in the first universe had arrived. The Ash Wolf race was a first-rate race of the first universe, second only to the demon race, space rats, and hell ants in the top 3. It was said that they had a certain blood relationship with the greedy wolf race of the second universe, but that was a long time ago. At present, the Grey Wolf tribe and the Greedy Wolf tribe each lived in different dimensions of the universe and had long since lost contact with each other. In fact, they were in different camps previously. Once the Tianji race started a war with the races of the second universe, the Grey Wolf tribe and the Greedy Wolf tribe would also clash. Compared to the Greedy Wolf race of the second universe, the Ash Wolf race was more brutal. Although they didn't have the bloodline talent of the Greedy Wolf race, they had a Battle Wolf Berserk ability. Once this bloodline talent was activated, the Ash Wolf race's elite cultivation would instantly skyrocket. Their entire body would be covered in golden armor, and some parts of their bloodline true body would undergo different changes, increasing their combat power. Because of this, the Ash Wolf race was also known as the Vajra Battle Wolf. Among the many slave races of the Tianji race, the Demon race, Space Rats, and Hell Ants were known as the top 3 races because of their outstanding overall strength. But in fact, in terms of individual combat power, the Ash Wolf race wasn't much weaker than the other 3 races. Unfortunately, the overall strength of the Ash Wolf race was too weak, and the race's foundation was very awkward. Because the race was a half-blood greedy wolf race that migrated from the second universe tens of thousands of years ago, there was no slumbering bloodline ancestor in the ancestral land of the race. The entire greedy wolf race only had one sector Lord Old Monster, and that was the race's strongest combat power. If it wasn't for this, with the greedy wolf race's violent and warlike nature, if there really was a universe level or even an immortal level bloodline ancestor in the race, they might not have been willing to be enslaved by the Tianji race. Their foundation was too weak, and they didn't have a backer. For the continuation of the race, after the sector Lord Old Monster in the race was suppressed, the entire race could only submit in humiliation. Chapter 3861. The Sanlong Star Region. Not all the fleets of the various races of the Alliance had arrived, but there were fleets of hundreds of races. Some of them had tens of thousands of battleships, while others had hundreds of thousands of battleships. This was the case for some of the first-rate races. The fleets of hundreds of races added up to an army of nearly 30 million battleships. In terms of numbers, they had already surpassed the Alliance army of the 4 races. Moreover, this army of the Alliance army was waiting at ease. Nearly 30 million battleships were spread out in the void of the periphery of the Sanlong Star region. They were spread out in the endless void, stretching for thousands of miles. However, although this defensive army was huge, it was composed of fleets of hundreds of races. This could be seen vaguely from the arrangement of the formation. This was definitely a fatal weakness. Hundreds of races could not form a unified command. Once the war started, the obedience of the superiors would be greatly restricted. This was the most taboo in a war in space. The alliance of 10,000 races was well aware of this, but this problem could not be solved. After all, the alliance had just been established, and it was already good enough that more than 2,000 races could be tied together for the time being. It was impossible to achieve a unified command in a short time. Similarly, the alliance army of the four races had considered this problem. Therefore, when they arrived at the Songlong Star region and saw this motley crew, the Demon Senior and the main flagship fortress, West Punitive Expedition, who was also the commander-in-chief of the alliance army of the four races, laughed on the spot. Such a motley crew. How dare they call themselves the alliance army of the 10 races? What joke? Shaking his head and laughing, Grandpa Mo immediately gave the order. Start shouting immediately. Ask the other party to hand over the letter of surrender within 2 hours. Otherwise, start the war immediately. All battleships fire in unison. At this moment, the 20 million allied army of the demon, space rats, hell ants, and giant ferocious had all entered the Songlong Star region. They were hovering at the periphery of the star region. Directly in front of them was the alliance army of the 10 races with a long line of defense. The two major warring camps were separated by the void of the universe, tens of millions of miles away. The total number of battleships on both sides had reached more than 50 million. This space war was rare in the past 10,000 years. Even in the space war between two planes, it was rare to see it. But now, the civil war between the slave races of the first universe had displayed such a scale. It could be seen how serious the chaos in the first universe was now. Under Grandpa Mo's order, the 22 million battleships of the Alliance Army of the four races immediately launched their cannons and energy shields. The battleships, a dense, low-humming sound echoed throughout the void, and different kinds of dazzling lights of different colors, forming. The hull was small and unequal. At the same time, the few fortresses with a diameter of 100,000 meters that were responsible for the communication also turned on the high-power directional communication system on the ships, transmitting Grandpa Mo's message to the hostile camp thousands of kilometers away. Hand over the letter of surrender within 2 hours. Otherwise, an all-out war will begin. This was very forceful. It was completely different from the strategy of this punitive army when they attacked the space rat race, the hell ant race, and even the giant ferocious race. Previously, they were mainly trying to rope in and appease. But now, they didn't even give them a chance to talk. They directly demanded that they hand over the letter of surrender. Otherwise, they would start a war. Such a tough attitude, especially when they were also being attacked. But the treatment they received at this moment was so different from the space rat race and the other two races. They were clearly looking at people through a crack in the door. They didn't treat the gray wolf race as a dish at all. Song Rongyu, the patriarch of the gray wolf race, was in the main fleet of the gray wolf race in the central region of the opposite camp. In this battle, Song Rongyu was the chief commander of the nearly 30 million allied battleships. In a rage, Song Rongyu directly expressed his attitude through the star directional sound transmission system. Four races of demons, you have gone too far. I, Song Rongyu, represent the gray wolf race to declare that we will never surrender. Although you four races are strong, you aren't strong enough to go against the other races of the first universe. Demons, space rats, hell ants, and giant ferocious race, I advise you to retreat immediately. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences. The sector lord of the other side had spoken. If they didn't respond, it would seem like they were afraid of the other side, and it would affect the morale of their own side. Grandfather Mo responded at the first possible moment. His attitude was as tough as usual, although he was only a half-step region lord. As the chief commander of a fleet like the other side, his imposing manner wasn't inferior in the slightest. Song Rongyu, I'm Demon Lord Mo. In terms of cultivation, perhaps I should call you Senior. Senior, but now that our two armies are facing each other, you and I are both the chief commanders of the fleet. I don't have to be courteous to you. This is the last warning. You have 3 minutes to consider. Don't make a mistake. After 3 minutes, we'll launch an all-out attack. This is a military order, not a child's play. Consider carefully. Roar. Preposterous. Fire the cannons immediately. Song Rongyu's roar instantly resounded from the opposing side, and he was clearly slightly angry from embarrassment. As a sector lord, at this moment, he'd been warned by a half-step region lord in front of countless experts, and he was on the verge of exploding from rage. Moreover, he'd even lost all reason because of this. After all, he'd been suppressing his anger since before this, and coupled with the violent temperament of the Ash Wolf clan, Song Rongyu suddenly going berserk at this moment was within expectations. But this had already violated the taboo of commanding. At the very least, it imperceptibly left behind a bad impression of Song Rongyu that was easily angered, impulsive, and had no intelligence in the hearts of the higher-ups of the other clans that formed this enormous allied army. The battle hadn't even begun. Yet the seeds of unsteadiness in the hearts of the troops had imperceptibly appeared in the enemy camp. This was precisely the reason why Grandfather Mo had intentionally infuriated Song Rongyu. Bang! Rumble! Enormous rumbling resounded. Moreover, it wasn't just one or two, but a dense expanse of rumbling that was utterly impossible to count. The rumbling was caused by the simultaneous firing of countless cannons. In an instant, the entire expanse of space was completely illuminated, and countless beams of energy interweaved into a net that whistled forward. However, it wasn't the allied army that had fired the cannons. As soon as the furious roar of Song Rongyu resounded, the chief commander of the allied army, Grandfather Mo, had immediately given the order to fire the cannons and launch an all-out attack. The so-called 3 minutes hadn't even been 3 seconds when the entire enormous fleet of 22 million battleships had launched a round of attacks. Chapter 3862. The roars continued without end. In addition to the 22 million battleships of the four races, the nearly 30 million troops of the 10,000 races across the void also opened fire. For a time, countless energy light beams of different sizes burst out in the void, interweaving into a terrifying giant net, covering the void between the two armies. The scene was too dazzling, so beautiful that it was suffocating. The originally gray void of the universe had now become like a bright world in a fairy tale, dazzling people. However, beautiful things always had a unique fatality. The true essence of any of the dazzling energy light beams that interweaved this giant net was actually killing. Rumble, boom. After a short burst of brilliance, the killing power of this dazzling giant net was finally displayed. Dense roars rang out, and the energy light beams of the battleships shot back and forth. In the defense lines spread out by the two camps, both sides had their targets. Some battleships turned into huge fireballs and completely exploded. The void of the universe became brighter and more dazzling. But at this time, this scene had nothing to do with a fairy tale. The style of the scene changed instantly, and the fairy tale became a doomsday-like scene of destruction. Every huge fireball that bloomed represented the withering of a large number of lives. In this battle, the demon race and the other four races did not intend to be soft. Of the 9 gold members of the Alliance, 7 had already been claimed, and the other 2 would be decided in the future. Therefore, in order to subdue the Grey Wolf tribe, the method of persuading them to join the alliance was no longer suitable. The only way was to forcibly recruit them into the alliance with iron-blooded combat power. At this time, the battle began and the void trembled. Every minute, every second, there would be battleships exploding in the void, turning into huge fireballs. Every minute, every second, there would be a large number of lives that turned into ashes and were annihilated. Both camps were like this, but no one retreated. However, as time went on, the originally evenly matched battle unknowingly tilted. The alliance of the 10,000 races with nearly 30 million battleships gradually showed signs of weakness. Although this camp had a large number of battleships, they were all a motley crew after all. They were hastily assembled by the fleets of hundreds of slave races. Not only was the command not unified, but the grade of the warships was also slightly inferior. On the other hand, the four-race Demon Race Alliance army had an advantage in terms of battle command. On the other hand, the four-race Alliance Army's battleship specifications were clearly superior to the enemy's. Although not all of the 10 million battleships deployed by the demonic tribe were fortresses with diameters of 50,000 meters and 100,000 meters, the proportion was extremely high. After all, due to Yi Xian's proposal to collect a toll fee, the Demonkin had made a huge fortune. They had received all kinds of resources and battleships, proving once again that the gold mine had made the ferryman rich. In addition, the Space Rat clan, the Hell Ant clan, and the Giant Ferocious clan that joined the Crusade army later only had 4 million warships each. In order to express their attitude, all the warships that these three clans mobilized to join the Crusade army were of higher specifications. Under such circumstances, although the allied forces of the four demonic races were only 22 million in number, which was less than the allied forces led by the Grey Wolf clan in the opposite void. But overall, in the huge allied forces of the four demonic races, whether it was the number of fortresses or the number of fortresses, they exceeded the enemies by several times. This was definitely a powerful advantage that could not be ignored. After only half a day, the allied forces of the 10,000 races on the opposite side were showing signs of defeat. Among the fleets of hundreds of races, the fleets of some small races that had only sent a little more than 10,000 battleships had all been wiped out. The battle was very tragic. Both sides had suffered losses, and the proportion of losses was not small. In terms of the destruction of the battleship, even on the side of the four demon clans, in just half a day, the number of casualties had reached nearly 1 million, and the allied forces, whose warships were inferior in size, had already lost more than 2 million warships, close to the 3 million mark. The artillery fire of the allied forces of the four demonic races was too fierce. The number of fortresses was originally large, but the command was not only unified, but also flexible, showing the mature art of command. Under the correct command of Grandpa M.O., the fortresses of the four demonic races concentrated their artillery fire from time to time, specifically targeting the fortresses and other large warships of the enemy camp. At first, this strategy was not obvious, but as time passed, the experts in the various fleets of the Alliance soon found that something was wrong. In their camp, the fortresses of 50,000 meters in diameter and 100,000 meters in diameter were getting fewer and fewer. These fortresses were generally responsible for the functions of the flagship, and orders were passed down layer by layer. In addition, because the battlefield of the two camps was separated by the void tens of thousands of miles, although the fortresses of 5,000 meters in diameter and 10,000 meters in diameter could also reach this distance. But in terms of powerful lethality, in the distance of tens of thousands of miles, only the power of the large and small fortresses could have enough deterrence. As the number of fortresses on the Alliance's side plummeted, the crisis finally emerged. The motley army, which had never been under a unified command in the first place, was almost completely paralyzed. Almost all the fleets of the hundreds of races that made up the coalition army were fighting on their own. The firepower of the naval cannons was like a sheet of loose sand, unable to form a suppressive force. This was a vicious cycle. The fortresses of the various fleets of the Alliance were getting fewer and fewer, and the deterrence of the allied forces of the four demonic races was rapidly decreasing. This was awkward. The four demonic races of the allied forces still had the same number of fortresses. The black antimatter death ray cannons with shocking diameters fired one after another, and it was a concentrated attack. Often, a volley of shots would instantly turn a large number of warships to dust. As for the strongholds in their camp, most of them had been consumed by the chaotic battle. Under this situation, the situation was getting worse and worse, and to the Alliance, it was already very dangerous. But facing all this, the commander of the Alliance army, the old monster Tsang Rongyu, could only roar and roar, but did not give any constructive orders. In fact, even if there were such orders, they would not be able to reach the entire army in an instant. The flagship fortresses that served as the relay for the orders were more or less destroyed. This situation made the commanders of the various fleets of the Alliance extremely disappointed. An incompetent commander led to the end of this war. Finally, among the hundreds of races, some of the fleet commanders began to give the order to retreat. This was something that could not be helped. They could not withstand the concentrated firepower of the enemy's fortresses at all. If they stayed, it would be futile. Chapter 38:63. In just half a day, the balance of the battle was completely tilted. The alliance led by the Grey Wolf tribe was defeated due to the poor leadership of the higher-ups. As the number of strongholds in the alliance army decreased, there was no longer any suspense about the final outcome of this battle. The commanders of the hundreds of fleets of the weaker races who had come as reinforcements were all infuriated. They did not want to see their people waste their lives under such substandard battle commands. Soon, the fleets of the various races began to retreat. In the end, it almost formed a wave. The damaged fleets of the various races fought to leave the front line and retreat to the void behind them. This scene was simply the perfect illustration of an army that had lost like a landslide. However, the fleets of the various races that came as reinforcements had a way out. To the Grey Wolf tribe, the master of the Grey Wolf Star region, there was no way to retreat. They would either win this battle or be enslaved. Roar! Who dares to retreat? Those who flee in the face of battle die. At the critical moment, the ancestor of the Grey Wolf tribe, the sector Lord Tsang Rongyu, suddenly roared. Then, his figure dashed out of the flagship stronghold of the Grey Wolf tribe and revealed his bloodline true body. A huge green wolf with a body as thick as needles appeared in the void. Its huge eyes glowed with blood, and its body emitted a murderous aura. The formless pressure of Sector Lord enveloped the void for thousands of miles. Boom! The gigantic green wolf merely raised its right forelimb, turned its head, and pressed in the direction of the void behind it. A fleet of about 3,000 to 4,000 that was retreating was completely annihilated. Thousands of warships of various types, without exception, all turned into giant fireballs that lit up the void. Sector Lord-level powerhouses, although not all of them, could illuminate the heavens. Since they could be called a Sector Lord, they were basically the most powerful in a territory. Not to mention thousands of warships. Even tens of thousands of warships couldn't withstand a few hits from a Sector Lord Old Monster. The old man had been driven mad by the crushing defeat before him, and he had already fallen into a state of frenzy. Otherwise, he would absolutely not use such an iron-blooded method. One must know that the fleet that was destroyed by his palm didn't even belong to the Ashwolf race. None of the Ashwolf race's fleet dared to retreat. After all, with their own Sector Lord overseeing the battlefield, who would dare to retreat? Even if he was scared to death, no matter how unwilling he was to fight, he could only force himself to continue. The fleet that had been obliterated by Tsang Rongyu's palm belonged to a small and weak race. Perhaps this race did not have the ability to fight the Ashwolf race head-on, but now that everyone was a part of the alliance of 10,000 races, their status in the alliance was equal. Moreover, although this battle was between the Myriad Races Alliance and the Four Races Alliance, after all, the other races were here to help the Ashwolf clan. No matter which angle one looked at it from, the Grey Wolf tribe's Sector Lord Old Monster didn't have the right to stop others from retreating. He even had the right to annihilate the fleet sent by the other tribe. At the very least, the alliance of 10,000 races had just been established. The details of military discipline and other aspects had not been drawn up yet. The so-called fleeing at the last minute was too far-fetched. It could be said that Tsang Rongyu's attack had completely pushed the Ashwolf clan into a state of eternal damnation. Not to mention the Devil Cultivator and the other allied forces, at the very least, the Ashwolf clan would definitely not be able to survive in the Myriad Races Alliance. They would be ostracized by the other tribes and even be held accountable. All of this was caused by the ancestor of the Ashwolf race himself. He couldn't blame anyone else. However, at this moment, although his action of annihilating the fleet of a race had indeed chilled the hearts of the other fleets that came to help, there was no fleet that was willing to stay here and continue to work for this ingrate of the Ashwolf race. However, Tsang Rongyu was a Sector Lord Old Monster after all. Coincidentally, there was only one Sector Lord existence in the two sides that were engaged in an intense battle. There was no sector Lord existence in the Alliance of 10,000 Races Alliance. There was none in the hundreds of fleets that came from the Alliance of 10,000 Races Alliance. Now that Song Rongyu, the only sector lord present, had gone berserk, his might was truly terrifying. The higher-ups of the fleets that were originally retreating were all stunned and immediately gave the order to stop the retreat. The situation was stronger than the person. Even if they didn't have the heart to continue fighting under the threat of Song Rongyu's sector lord, all the fleets could only grit their teeth and endure. Even if they were slacking, it was still better than being annihilated by this crazy old wolf in the middle of the retreat. It could be said that from this moment on, the Ashwolf race had not only lost the battle, but also the hearts of the people. If they could still win this battle, then it was simply illogical. Song Rongyu also understood this logic. He also saw the situation clearly, but he was unwilling to accept this. In his opinion, this battle actually still had a chance of survival. The advantage of the Alliance of 10,000 Races Alliance was only in command and the number of large and small strongholds that could be used as a deterrent. He admitted that in the art of commanding in space battles, he was indeed inferior to the enemy. In just half a day, he had created such an embarrassing result. Half of the strongholds on his side had been destroyed by the enemy's concentrated firepower. However, this didn't matter. As long as he made a move, with the terrifying power of Sector Lord Old Monster, it wasn't difficult to destroy the main command flagship strongholds of the enemy camp. Even the large and small fortresses where the enemy had the numerical advantage could be destroyed with just a few strikes. The difference in strength between such high-end combat forces could be easily evened out again. Once these 2 points were achieved, the various fleets on his side that were slacking off would definitely be filled with vigor again, bursting with new hope for this battle. Thinking up to here, Song Rongyu didn't hesitate anymore. He roared into the sky, and the huge Ashwolf true body raised its right paw again. This time, it aimed at the main flagship stronghold of the enemy camp from thousands of miles away. The West Expedition. If this paw struck out, the West Expedition would definitely fall. Even the 2 domain Lord Old Monsters in the fleet wouldn't be able to resist. Just at this critical juncture, a cold snort suddenly rang out. Old Song, do you think this emperor doesn't exist? As this cold voice sounded, a crack appeared in the sky above the center of the battlefield. A huge pillar of blood-red energy leaked out as the demon emperor, Imo Zhiran, stepped out with a dark expression. Chapter 3864. After charging out of the outer region of the origin of all evil Starfield, Yixian was shocked by the scene in the distance. At this moment, the vast expanse of space was still filled with flames. The hundreds of forts and strongholds of various sizes were not small in scale. They were a huge fleet. After completely exploding, even if the energy was burned, it would still take a certain amount of time. F***CK. No wonder the 2 supreme consciousnesses of the primordial era didn't start a massacre after returning. So it turns out that there was already such a huge fleet outside as a scapegoat. Looking at the spectacular scene in front of him, Yixian was stunned for a long time before coming back to his senses. He muttered to himself, and then a sense of danger arose in his heart. Without any hesitation, he immediately had the Starfield Life Fortress remove the mechanical demon bug state and return to the appearance of the demon battleship. Then, he activated the concealment formation and quickly left this place of trouble. Based on his speculations, this fleet had probably been dispatched by the Heaven's Legacy race to reinforce Di Xiaofeng's group. Now that they had lost contact with Di Xiaofeng's group, and the fleet that had been dispatched had been completely wiped out, the vast void illuminated by the flames, this matter had definitely alarmed the Heaven's Legacy race. Base camp. Perhaps the reinforcements sent by the Heaven's Legacy city were already on their way and would arrive soon. The encounter between the demon battleship and Di Xiaofeng had not been leaked out yet. If someone were to see the demon battleship appear in this star domain, it might arouse the suspicion of some people. The best way to deal with this situation was to quickly evacuate and pretend that they had never been to this star field, the source of all evil. In this way, Not only would Sha Baofeng's identity not be suspected, but the identities of Di Xiaofeng and the others would also not be too troublesome in the future. After the Heaven's Legacy clan's follow-up fleet entered the origin of Evil Star Field to search, the 8 of them should be listed as missing, not dead. At that time, if necessary, Yi Xian could transform into Di Xiaofeng's appearance and find a reasonable excuse to return to Yang. After leaving the origin of Evil Star Field, the demon battleship continued to head towards the Heaven's Legacy clan's headquarters, the Heaven's Legacy City. However, it did not choose the main route to the Heaven's Legacy City, because it would encounter the reinforcements from the Heaven's Legacy clan and cause unnecessary trouble. Yi Xian intentionally deviated from the main route of the Starry Sky, allowing the demon battleship to travel in a relatively remote area of the Starry Sky. Towards all of this, the commander of the Demon Royal Guard, Chanas, didn't have any objections. He didn't even make a sound. The reason he left the Demon Emperor's planet with Yi Xian was because he wanted to get promoted and make a fortune in the Heaven's Legacy City. But now, it seemed that this trip to the Heaven's Legacy City had clearly turned into a terrifying one. Even the young patriarch of the Heaven's Legacy clan, Di Xiaofeng, had his eyes wide open. He had been beheaded under the watchful eyes of others. He had to bury this matter deep in his heart and not tell anyone. Otherwise, he would not have a good ending. In short, no matter what Lord Sha did, he could only follow. The two of them were already grasshoppers on the same rope. Chanas felt a sense of indignation that he had been tricked into a den of thieves for no reason, but there was nothing he could do. A day later, the demon warship stopped in a remote part of the void. They were only 5 days away from the Heaven's Legacy race's main camp. Yi Xian didn't plan on continuing forward because he needed to at least digest his gains this time. This kind of digestion wasn't referring to the shocking harvest he had obtained from the giant furnace cauldron in the core of the origin of all evil, but the mechanical intelligence core of Di Xiaofeng and the other 8 core members of the Heaven's Legacy clan. The nether cauldron emulsion, the 10,000 evil origin liquid, the 9-color meat paste, and the remains of the 12 powerful primordial creatures were all resources that could be used for a long time in the future. If their levels were too high, they could only be used at critical moments, such as when breaking through to the next realm. He would only use them when he needed to repair the hidden injuries of his body. However, the mechanical intelligence core of Di Xiaofeng and the other 8 upper echelons of the Heaven's Legacy clan had to be digested as soon as possible, because they were heading to the headquarters of the Heaven's Legacy clan. These 8 mechanical intelligence cores contain the memories of Di Xiaofeng and the others, as well as their comprehension and experience in the field of mechanical fusion. To Yi Xian, this was the most important thing he needed right now. He chose an inconspicuous and barren planet in this remote area. Then, he shrunk the size of the Devil battleship and entered a huge chasm on the surface of the planet. After taking a detour for a while, he lurked deep underground. He was now completely disheartened by Yi Xian's strange actions. In any case, if he followed this madman, he could encounter any strange thing. If he had the chance, he would choose to clean himself up and then leave him far away. Provoke. Of the 8 mechanical intelligence cores, the most important ones were the electronic consciousnesses of Di Xiaofeng and the other 8 upper echelons of the Heaven's Legacy clan. This part took up 2/3 of the intelligence core crystal, and the other third was the memories of their electronic lives. To put it bluntly, it was just data and pieces of information. It could be said to be extremely long and complicated. What Yi Xian needed to do now was to carefully browse through and even comb through all of the data and information in the 8 mechanical intelligence cores. This would be of great benefit to him when he entered the Heaven's Legacy clan's headquarters, the Heaven's Legacy City. It would be of great benefit. This was the so-called knowing oneself and knowing the enemy. This was the principle behind 100 battles. After all, it was all of the memories of 8 lives. The amount of data and information was unimaginable. Fortunately, Yi Xian had the assistance of the devouring system to help him sort through them. Then he could browse through them one by one. As a result, after a short day, Yi Xian had already read through all of the data in his memories and engraved it in his heart. Moreover, all of this was stored in a separate data classification database from the devouring system. If he forgot, or if he needed to carefully investigate a specific event, Yixian could retrieve it from this database at any time. Apart from these memories, the thing that Yixian gained the most from was the comprehension of the various Heavenly Legacy clans' mechanical abilities contained within these 8 mechanical intelligence cores. Basically, they were all electronic abilities. Yixian also studied them one by one. Then, he focused on the information that Di Xiaofeng and the others had comprehended about the Heaven's Legacy race's ultimate secret technique, the mechanical fusion ability. The Starfield's fortress truly was formidable. As the only fortress in the world, its abilities in many aspects even surpassed those of the Heaven's Legacy race. Otherwise, when young Master Linghu appeared with the Starfields, he would not have been the target of so much shock from all the major factions. Chapter 3865. The war in the Grey Wolf Star region had finally come to an end. Song Rongyu, the ancestor of the Grey Wolf clan, was severely injured and would not be able to recover in a short period of time. In order to protect the life of the ancestor, the Grey Wolf clan surrendered unconditionally. Those who joined the Yixian Nameless Alliance in this way could only be ordinary members. They could not even become bronze members. Of course, since the Grey Wolf clan could not be fully trusted, the commander-in-chief of the 4 demon clans' fleet, Grandpa Mo, did not reveal anything about the Nameless Alliance to the Grey Wolf clan after the first-generation Demon Emperor and the other 3 sector lords left. He only asked the Grey Wolf clan to send a domain Lord Old Monster to lead the clan's army into the 4 demon clans' allied army and continue the war. Moreover, although the Grey Wolf clan had joined the 4 demon clans' allied army, the 4 demon clans' allied army was still called the 4 demon clans' allied army to the outside world. The Grey Wolf clan resisted stubbornly. Now, they were only surrendered troops and had not officially become an ordinary member of the alliance. They were not qualified to call themselves a clan in the 5 demon clans' allied army. In the future, when the Nameless Alliance grew stronger and the higher-ups of the Grey Wolf clan knew all this, their intestines would turn green with regret. They had forced themselves into the situation of being enslaved. After all, if they had not resisted stubbornly and joined the Nameless Alliance voluntarily, no matter how weak their clan was, they could have become an ordinary member from the beginning. At least they could have avoided the process of not even being an ordinary member and being enslaved like a surrendered soldier. In just half a day, half of the Grey Wolf clan's more than 4 million battleships were taken away, including a large number of clansmen. They were led by a domain Lord Old Monster of the Grey Wolf clan and were incorporated into the 4 demon clans' allied army to continue the war. Regarding this result, the alliance of 10,000 clans formed by the servant clans of the First Universe surprisingly did not have many voices of condemnation and rebuke. The ancestor of the Ash Wolf clan, Song Rongyu, had gone against the tide at the last moment and had completely lost his heart and morals. Now, the clan was enslaved by the 4 demon clans' alliance army. Now, no one was willing to stand up and speak. However, the Myriad Races Alliance did not suffer a setback because of this. After learning that the allied forces of the 4 races had once again set off on an expedition, all the races in the Myriad Races Alliance mobilized and once again assembled their forces to resist together. The era of all-out war in the First Universe had completely begun. Even if the allied forces of the 4 demon races were powerful and had been singing songs of victory all the way, it was impossible for this planar civil war to end in a short time. Yixian did not know or care about what had happened in the Ashwolf tribe. In his opinion, with the Devil Cultivator, Space Rats, Hell Ants, and the other top 3 races of the First Universe joining forces, the full rise of this allied army was already unstoppable in the First Universe. Even if it involved a war between Sector Lord-level existences, the Nameless Alliance had as many as 6 Sector Lord Old Monsters that could descend with their clones at any time. They didn't need to fear any of the top factions. What's more, the subsequent expeditions were only some weak slave races from the First Universe. In short, Yixian was almost completely relieved about the subsequent battle situation of the allied army led by the Devil Cultivator. He didn't care at all because there would basically be no accidents. The reason why Yixian temporarily left the Allied army was to return to the source of all evil star field to see the situation. After the last huge change, all the fleets and experts of the three universe planes had all fled. No one stayed in the entire vast source of all evil star field. Even the native ferocious beasts that originally lived in the core hinterland of the source of all evil were brought out by Yixian. The rest were all personally buried by the heavenly Tao's green eye and sent into the netherworld furnace. It could be said that in the entire source of all evil star field, there was now nothing but the netherworld furnace. Yixian was extremely curious about what the netherworld furnace would condense this time, but he did not dare to take the risk and activate the interstellar coordinate jump ability to recklessly enter the source of all evil. Who knew if the heavenly Tao's green eye had left some perception power and was secretly observing the void? That was a terrifying existence on the same level as the headless infant corpse. Even if Yixian had the headless infant corpse as his backer, he could not act rashly. After all, the headless infant corpse had not recovered yet. According to his plan, he definitely had to go to the source of all evil star field, but he had to make a foolproof plan. The worst-case scenario was that the heavenly Tao's green eye had left some perception power there and was secretly observing everything. Under such circumstances, even if Yixian entered the source of all evil star field, he had to be able to not expose the headless infant corpse. In other words, he had to be able to rely on himself without using the headless infant corpse. His ability to escape alive. If he only had the strength of a level 3 cosmic light, he obviously would not be able to do this. Even if Yixian activated the bloodline of the ancient ape demons and his strength instantly increased by a large margin, he was only at level 6 universe realm. Of course, he still had the 9 devil ape transformations. The first to third transformations of the 9 devil ape transformations could instantly increase the strength of the ancient ape demons by a small level. The third transformation was equivalent to level 3. Even so, he was still only at the peak of level 9 universe realm. According to Yixian's estimations, if the heavenly Tao's azure I really did leave behind some perception in the depths of the source of all evil and secretly paid attention to everything. Then after he entered and sensed this point, if he didn't want to rely on the headless infant corpse and rely on the interstellar coordinate jump ability to successfully escape, he would have to possess the ability to reach the limit. He had to be a young Star Lord. In other words, he had to ensure that everything was fine. Even if he used all his means, he would still need to make a breakthrough by a small level. Either he fully comprehended the 4th transformation of the 9 devil ape transformations, or his original body would have to make another breakthrough by 2 small levels. Once the original body's cultivation base reached the 5th level of the cosmic light realm, Yixian's cultivation base would reach the 7th level of the universe realm after activating the devil ape's bloodline and displaying the true form of the 3-headed, 6-armed devil ape. That way, coupled with the 3 small levels of the first transformation to the 3rd transformation, his strength would be just enough to reach the Star Lord level. Yixian's choice was the latter. It would take some time to deduce the 4th transformation of the ancient ape demons, and the system was doing its best to calculate it. Therefore, it was Yixian's only choice to make another breakthrough by 2 small levels and forcibly raise his original body to level 5 cosmic light. After leaving the ancestral land of the Hell Ant clan, the Nether Ant galaxy, he was not in a hurry to go to the root of all evil galaxy. Instead, he found a deserted planet in a remote region of space nearby and dove into it. He entered the planet and began his closed-door cultivation. This time, his requirements were a bit higher. Although it was only a breakthrough of 2 small levels, he had just made a breakthrough not too long ago. Yixian was already a cosmic light expert at the moment. It was already difficult for him to make a breakthrough by 1 small level, let alone 2 in a row. It was obviously not a small challenge. However, he had no other choice. Chapter 3866. After entering the interior of the abandoned planet and setting up layers of restrictions, Xian sat down cross-legged and started to think about the resources he could use for his breakthrough this time. As he had just broken through consecutively not long ago, it would be rather difficult for him to break through twice in the Qi and Blood realms this time. During special times, he had to use strong medicine. After pondering for a while, Xian waved his hand and took out a large amount of cultivation resources from the undying world in his body. They were all top-grade treasures. Any one of them would cause a commotion and be fought over in the outside world. Dark Furnace Lotion. This was used to wrap the entire body. During the breakthrough process, it would constantly heal the body's hidden injuries and hidden injuries. 2 drops of all evil origin liquid. Without a doubt, this was the main driving force for Xian's breakthrough this time. Apart from that, there were also 10 pieces of Class 9, 9-colored planet core origins, 2 drops of dark liquid, and 2 drops of high-grade hell ant liquid secreted by Sector Lord Golden Rat Big Tooth. Of course, they were all treasures that had been purified by the Shenong 4-colored flames. These 2 treasures had miraculous effects on body tempering and were used to support and strengthen the all-evil origin liquid. Finally, there was also a large piece of precious blood and precious flesh cut from the purple gold void rat from the Hell Ant tribe. It was about 3 meters wide and contained a large amount of the purest high-grade energy. This piece of rat meat had been purified and roasted by the Shenong 4-colored flames. After roasting, it had shrunk to the size of grain. Su Fan Yuan was full of essence. As for the 9-colored meat paste, forget it. That thing could only be added when refining medicine. Xian would have a psychological barrier if he swallowed it directly. At this moment, this large amount of top-grade cultivation resources were all floating in the air in front of Xian. The underworld liquid, the high-level hellish ant liquid, and the precious blood and flesh of the primordial supreme, being purple gold void rat, were all purified and roasted by the divine farmer's 4-colored flames. If these things were placed in front of the core members of any top-grade faction in the 3 universes, they would instantly stop breathing. The grade was too high and the quality was too pure. Even Sector Lord old monsters or universe-level existences could use them. Of course, they couldn't directly break through after using them. At that level, breaking through a small level required a large amount of daily accumulation. Although there were times when one encountered a great fortune and directly broke through, or even broke through several small stages in succession, such situations were rare and could not be replicated. However, at this moment, Xian, who was sitting cross-legged in the air, looked at the top-notch resources floating in front of him. His face didn't reveal any surprise or joy, and he remained calm. In his opinion, with such ample preparation this time, it shouldn't be too much of a problem for him to forcibly raise his main body's cultivation base to the 5th cosmic realm in one fell swoop after breaking through 2 minor realms again. Xian's success rate, at least 80% or even 90%, but this process would definitely be extremely of pain. The various accumulations in his body had long been completely exhausted in the recent breakthroughs. The state of his physical body and blood was completely in a state of decline. Under such circumstances, to suddenly break through 2 small levels and increase one's strength, the test of one's physical body was obviously extremely severe. A bout of physical pain was unavoidable. Shaking his head and smiling bitterly, Xian suddenly waved his hand. First, he swallowed the all-evil origin liquid, the purified dark liquid, and the high-grade precious hellish ant liquid. Then, he wolfed down the purple gold void rat meat that was glowing with a purple gold light and dripping with sesame oil. After that, with a wave of his hand, the white netherworld furnace lotion with a radius of 3 meters flew over and enveloped Xian's entire body, bathing him within. Every inch of his skin and every pore on his body was breathing in the netherworld furnace lotion and being nourished by it. Finally, Xian closed his eyes and issued an order to the devouring system. It had already absorbed the energy from the 10 9-colored star cores and injected it into his body. Henceforth, This time's closed-door cultivation breakthrough finally began and fully unfolded in an instant. Intense pain came like a tide, surging and surging. In an instant, it evolved into a vast ocean that surged endlessly. All of this unfolded in Yixian's body. A small body, but there was a surging and surging wave like a raging torrent. This kind of pain could be imagined. From this moment on, Yixian completely forgot about the existence of time. Even his consciousness gradually became hazy because of this unprecedented pain. At this moment, he only had one consciousness, and that was the endless clanking sound of countless chains in his ears. This was precisely the reaction of the potential shackles of every inch of his flesh, blood, and gene cells being torn apart with all their might. It was as if his entire body had been completely crushed and ruthlessly kneaded. Yixian had even lost his perception of his body. The only thing left in the entire world was the endless clanking sound of the densely packed chains. After an unknown amount of time, the raging waves in his body finally stopped. Yixian's consciousness, which was on the verge of collapse, finally recovered. Slowly, he could feel the existence of his body. In the end, all the pain disappeared. Yixian only felt that his entire body was unprecedentedly light and detached. His consciousness was also unprecedentedly clear and agile. Carrying this strange feeling, Yixian slowly opened his eyes. In the next instant, the familiar sound of system notifications rang in his mind. Ding! Congratulations to the host for breaking through the Qi and Blood realm. Current realm, Cosmic Level 4. Ding! Congratulations to the host for breaking through the Qi and Blood realm. Current realm, Cosmic Level 5. Yixian took a deep breath, stood up, and roared, "Devil, ape true form." In less than a breath, the bloodline in his body was activated. The devil ape true form with 3 heads and 6 arms appeared. His original body's Cosmic Level 5 cultivation rose sharply, reaching Cosmic Level 7 in an instant. 9 Devil Ape Transformation. First transformation. Yixian roared once again. The body of the ancient demon ape that was 30 meters tall instantly increased in size. An inexplicable bloodline power instantly surged within its body, converging into a tide-like power. In the blink of an eye, its body, which was only 30 meters tall, directly soared to a height of 300 meters. Cultivation Aura, Cosmic Level 8. 9 Devil Ape Transformation. Second transformation. The second roar rang out, and the familiar feeling came again. The Qi and blood in the 3 true forms surged, surging to a height of 1,000 feet. Cultivation Aura, Cosmic Level 9 Peak. 9 Devil Ape Transformation. Third transformation. In the final change, Yixian raised his head and roared. As it unfolded, the endlessly surging blood and Qi energy within the 3 true bodies once again soared and surged. At first, it was like a roaring river, but then it turned into a boundless sea of rage. Their bodies also expanded rapidly from a height of 1,000 feet to a height of 100,000 feet. Chapter 3867. In a desolate area of the universe in the third universe, which was controlled by the 10 Ultimates' heavenly palace, the dominator of the cultivators. A feeble sound echoed as a feeble ray of light flashed across the void and disappeared at the end of the distance. 10 minutes later, the sound of ripping cloth suddenly came from a corner of the void. The void of the universe was like a piece of cloth being torn apart, and a black crack appeared. An old man in a green robe stepped out with a gloomy expression. His name was Zhou Yuchen, and he was a Star Lord, the Vice Master of the Rinjua Palace. Chilla. With the appearance of Zhou Yuchen, the same sound of ripping cloth came from several other directions in the void. 4 cracks appeared in the void, and 4 more figures walked out. They were all old men. They were all Star Lords. They were also Vice Masters of the Rinjua Palace, and Zhou Yuchen's colleagues. The 5 Star Lords had all arrived in this place within a short span of 3 breaths. Furthermore, they had arrived by tearing through the void. More importantly, Their faces were extremely gloomy, and there was a faint black aura around them. It was obvious that they were holding back their anger. This was really abnormal. The last to arrive was an old man in a gray robe. He had gray hair and a gray beard, giving off an otherworldly aura. He held an ancient compass in his hand, and at this moment his eyes were shining brightly. He looked at the compass in his hand for a few breaths of time. Then he raised his hand and pointed. It was precisely the light that had streaked across the void and quietly disappeared. The direction, he said solemnly, it's over there. The little bastard just left. It's only been 10 minutes. Go after him. He can't escape this time. Zhou Yuqin was a late Star Lord, not far away from becoming his own lord. He wasn't the vice master of the Rinjua Palace, but he was the leader of the 5 Star Lords. After confirming the direction of his prey's escape, Zhou Yuqin put on a ferocious expression and turned into an arrow, flying away as he mumbled. The other 4 Star Lords looked at each other and exchanged glances. All of them had ferocious looks on their faces. They didn't hesitate and followed him one after another. The target of these 5 Star Lords was the existence that had just turned into a ray of light and sped away from this void. It was Yi Xian's devouring clone, the invincible war god that the outside world called the invincible war god. To this day, there was still no conclusion as to who the invincible god of war's clone was, because the 10 Ultimates' heavenly palace had never been able to capture him. It was a case without clues. During this time, Yi Xian's devouring clone had always stayed in the 3rd universe's territory controlled by the 10 Ultimates' heavenly palace. The reason for this was that in this star field, in addition to the 10 extreme celestial palaces, there were other large and small sects and sections. Because it was the cultivation camp, the system was different from that of the technology camp. For the devouring doppelganger, finding suitable prey to devour was an opportunity, and it would be more convenient. On the other hand, the birth of the undying Dark Phoenix had aroused Yi Xian's interest. This kind of creature originally only existed in the distant Desolation era, but now it had appeared in the ancestral land of the 6th palace of the 10 Ultimates' heavenly palace. This was really strange. Yi Xian had kept the devouring clone in the cultivation camp. Another purpose was to investigate this matter thoroughly. After all, a creature like the undying Dark Phoenix only existed in the primordial era. As for the current Yi Xian, due to the headless corpse of the infant, he had all sorts of invisible ties with the legendary Great Desolate era. Therefore, Yi Xian couldn't ignore all the information and clues related to the Desolation era. And this undying Dark Phoenix, even in the distant Desolation era, was not in existence as common as a dog. Now that it had appeared in the ancestral land of a branch of the 10 Ultimates' heavenly palace, it revealed too much information. Yi Xian had to investigate clearly, otherwise he would feel uneasy. This was also the reason why the devouring clone had always been looking for trouble with the 10 Ultimates' heavenly palace. Of course, the consequences of doing so were very serious. The 10 Ultimates' heavenly palace had almost never stopped pursuing the devouring clone, but the unique attributes of the devouring clone were there. Moreover, Yi Xian's original body had left the Desolation Ancient Inheritance Tower, the demonic dragon phantom, and the weeping soul bloodhorn to all of them. Hence, the devouring clone. It was precisely because of this that although every battle and ambush that the devouring clone had experienced during this period of time could be said to be a life and death struggle, the final result was always a blessing. In every battle, the devouring clone would face opponents whose cultivation far surpassed him. In fact, it was not just one person. However, every single time, the devouring doppelganger would have a close shave with death. While it would not dare to say that it would be able to kill its opponent every single time, at the very least, it would be able to escape alive every single time. Furthermore, before escaping, it would more or less cause its opponent to suffer a little. If it weren't for this, the illustrious name of the invincible war god wouldn't have been called out. After this period of growth, the devouring clone's cultivation base had risen from the Grotto Heaven realm when he was separated from Yi Xian to the 14th realm, the grand completion of the Cosmic Light realm level 9. Compared to Yi Xian's original body, it was 4 small realms stronger. It was only one step away from the 15th realm, the Cosmos Realm. The Cosmos Realm was a watershed for the experts of the starry sky. Before the Cosmos Realm, even the grand completion of the Cosmic Light Realm Level 9 couldn't be called a mighty figure. Only after entering the Cosmos Realm could one be called a mighty figure of the Cosmos Realm. This point alone showed the difference between the Cosmos Realm and the Cosmic Light Realm. For Yi Xian's devouring clone, the opportunity for him to prove his strength to the Cosmos Realm had obviously arrived and matured. This opportunity was the 5 old monsters from the 10 Ultimates Heavenly Palace's 3rd palace, the Human Extinction Palace, who were tailing him closely. These 5 old monsters have been chasing the devouring clone for a month. During this month, the devouring clone had probed many times. Basically, it had fought with all of them briefly and individually. This kind of battle was a test for the devouring clone. As a perfect clone refined by the innate devouring treasure body, the best and fastest way to improve its strength was to devour. There was no other choice. This time, the devouring clone had set its eyes on the 5 old monsters and was ready to choose one of them to devour. Of course, this kind of devouring obviously couldn't achieve 100% efficiency. In the process of absorbing the energy for its own use, part of the energy would be lost. Moreover, the efficiency of this kind of energy would become lower and lower as the devouring clone's strength increased. Otherwise, devouring a Star Lord wouldn't have only allowed him to advance a small realm and prove his strength to the Cosmos Realm, even though he had already reached the grand completion of the Cosmic Light Realm. Chapter 3868. Whoosh! A black light flashed in the void, and a black beetle about 1,000 feet in size suddenly appeared. It was a Void Soldier Ladle. However, this Void Soldier Ladle was obviously different from the one seen in the Black Hole of Life in the first universe. Even the Emperor of the Void Soldier Ladle group, the 9-star Ladle Emperor, was only an ant compared to this one. It was like the Prime Soldier Ladle in the starry sky. The 9-star Ladle Emperor was 1,000 feet in size, and so was this Void Soldier Ladle. In addition, the 9-star Ladle Emperor had a ghost face with 9 stars on its back, but this Prime Soldier Ladle had 9 giant golden horns on its back. In addition to the bigger one on the top of its head, there were 10 golden horns in total, 1 big and 9 small. It was the Void Soldier Ladle that Yi Xian had transferred to the devouring doppelganger. Now, it had reconstructed its true body, and its strength and cultivation had greatly improved compared to before, growing together with the devouring doppelganger. And now, the cultivation aura emitted from the body of this Void Ladle had actually reached the Great Circle of Universe rank 9. The Void Soldier Ladle was a companion of the Void Marrow Crystal. It was between a living body and a non-living body. Its entire body was condensed from the extremely hard impurities that were squeezed out during the continuous condensation process of the Void Marrow Crystal. Although they were impurities, they were still repelled from the Void Marrow Crystal. A Void Marrow Crystal represented a universe plane, and it was the embodiment of a universe plane after its extreme condensation. It was enough to show its high level. Even the impurities that were expelled were definitely top-grade materials. Because of this, the crystal body of an ordinary Void Soldier Ladle was extremely hard. Ordinary ship cannons couldn't blast it open, let alone a Prime Soldier Ladle like this one. This Void Ladle Sovereign, who had been reconstructed with the help of Yi Xian's fortune, had only reached the pinnacle of the 9th step of the universe. However, he was still able to fight against 2 Star Lords without being defeated. It could be said that his battle prowess was heaven-shaking. During this period of time, the devouring doppelganger had been tossing and turning in the star region controlled by the 10 absolute celestial palaces. Venerable Void Ladle had taken action twice, and it could be said that he had made great contributions. If it were not for him, the devouring doppelganger would have most likely fallen in those 2 battles. However, it was also because of this that the existence of the Empyrean Ladle Lord was known by the Tenju Celestial Palace. The outside world had yet to determine whose avatar it was, but because of the existence of the Empyrean Ladle Lord, the Tenju Celestial Palace was certain that this avatar belonged to Prince Xian. After all, the fact that Prince Xian had once brought back an 8-star king ladle for the first universe was no secret in the 3 universes. Since then, the 10 Ultimates' Heavenly Palace had increased their efforts to hunt down the devouring doppelganger. Now, there was already a huge hunting team that had set up a large net and was searching in the void. The 5-star lords who had chased after the devouring clone were only a part of them. Of course, the reason why they were able to get so close to the devouring clone was because the old guy with the compass seemed to have mastered some kind of method to lock onto the location of the devouring clone. All of this was actually the result of the latter's deliberate actions. Everything was to lure the enemy into the trap. Now, the trap was ready, and even the bait, Venerable Void Ladle, had taken the initiative to show up. They were just waiting for the fish to take the bait. That black ladle has appeared. It's in the interior of the planet ahead, surrounded. That kid can't escape. He must be inside this planet. Zhou Yuqin keenly discovered the figure of the Void Ladle Lord. His eyes flashed as he shouted and issued an order to the other 4-star lords behind him. The 4 of them immediately separated and stood around the abandoned mineral star, surrounding the entire huge planet. Among them, the old guy with the compass was in the northwest direction. When his figure swept toward the ambush point, he habitually lowered his head and glanced at the compass in his hand. Then his expression changed drastically, and he subconsciously exclaimed softly, "No, it's too late." The devouring clone's indifferent but delighted voice echoed in his ears. Then a bloody light suddenly appeared behind the old guy's head and turned into a thin, long, curved horn. It was none other than the Weeping Soul Bloody Horn. Phew! Before the devouring clone could finish his sentence, the Weeping Soul Bloody Horn had already pierced into the back of the old guy's head and destroyed his mind. His primordial spirit collapsed, and he died instantly. The devouring clone did not hesitate any longer. He waved his hand and collected the old guy along with the ancient compass in his hand. Then he shouted toward the interior of the planet ahead, "Whoremonger, the wind is tight. Retreat." As soon as he said that, he disappeared. He concealed all his aura and rushed toward the rendezvous point that he had decided on earlier. Whoremonger was a title that Venerable Void Ladle Lord had requested himself. Previously, he had been able to reconstruct Venerable Void Ladle's true body because of the power of the Tower of Ancients. He was now a real crystal creature instead of a mark in the Tower of Ancients. It could be said that he had completely gained his own consciousness. In the camp of human cultivators, there was a term for swordsmen. They were all sword cultivators who were known as sword immortals. Venerable Void Ladle Lord was fascinated by them and liked their elegant temperament. Moreover, he was Venerable Void Ladle, so he called himself a whoremonger. The devouring clone did not point it out. Every time he called him that, he would hold back his laughter and almost laugh out loud several times, but the latter never realized it. At this moment, as the old guy who was holding the compass died instantly, and his body was taken away by the devouring clone along with the ancient compass that belonged to the human palace of absolutes. Zhou Yuqin and the other star lords were stunned at first. Then they burst into fury and roared furiously. "We've been tricked. This is a trap. Pfft. Damn, we were hunted by that kid, and it seems that he succeeded. If this matter spreads, our reputation will be tarnished, and we will become the laughingstock of countless star lords in the 3 planes. Go after him. He's not even in the universe realm, and now he's separated from Black Ladle, who's as strong as a star lord. He can't run far. Once we surround him, we'll capture him in one fell swoop. Black Ladle is coming. He wants to stall us and cover the kid's escape. Ignore him. We'll deal with him after we've dealt with that hateful kid." While roaring, the 4 star lords quickly left. Venerable Void Ladle only stopped abruptly when all of them disappeared. He said, "Idiot." Then he shook his body slightly and disappeared in an instant, quickly moving in another direction. He was not worried about the devouring clone at all. With the Tower of Ancients concealing its aura, even though those old guys were star lords, they would never be able to detect it. After all, The Tower of Ancients was a treasure of the ancients on the same level as the Shinnon Cauldron and the Netherworld Furnace. Chapter 3869. Universe 3, the Heavenly Wind Empire. One of the three empires under the Immortal Dynasty in the human race's science and technology camp. Today's third universe seemed to be peaceful, except for the occasional disturbances of the devouring avatars in half of the star sector controlled by the Tenju Celestial Palace in the Cultivation camp. There had been no major disturbances in the human race's science and technology camp, represented by the Immortal Dynasty. Of course, the news of the appearance of the universe zombies had raged for a period of time before. In the science and technology camp's Immortal Dynasty, and even the entire Universe 3 of the human race, it had caused panic. For this reason, the 10,000 Net Alliance and the Immortal Dynasty had sent out battleship armies and powerhouses to search for them. But since then, the so-called universe zombies had completely disappeared. The situation where an entire administrative planet of a dynasty was massacred and turned into a ghost realm did not appear again. As time passed, this matter slowly faded from the public eye. Many people believed that it was just a false alarm. Although it was true that an entire planet had been turned into a land of death by the universe zombies, there might be some misunderstanding. It was not the cosmic tragedy of the Heaven Battle planet. The zombies had spread to the universe's starry sky. It was possible that some viruses that had not been completely eliminated were brought to this planet by the battleship. Under certain conditions, it led to another outbreak of the zombie virus inside this planet. If this was the case, this matter would naturally be settled. There was nothing to be afraid of. The entire planet had been fully disinfected and cleaned, so it was impossible for the virus to leak out again. In addition, there was the super accident that broke out in the source of all evil in the first universe, followed by the appearance of young Master Linghu again. Not only did he not die, but there was also the news that two other peerless monsters were actually his avatars. Young Master Linghu, the primordial little demon ape, and young Master Netherworld were actually the same person. While the three dimensions were in an uproar, the attention of the human race had also been successfully attracted to the first universe. They were closely watching the chaos of war in the first universe. Gradually, no one paid attention to the news of the universe zombies in the third universe's science and technology camp anymore. In the void, a battleship was slowly sailing alone. This was a small fortress with a diameter of 50,000 meters. However, it was not a battleship, but a merchant ship. The surface of the ship was slightly damaged, giving people the feeling that it had encountered space pirates, broken through the siege, and escaped alone. In the command cabin on the top floor of the small fortress, the atmosphere was a bit strange. Although there were a lot of people in the enormous command cabin, they were all drinking wine and feasting on the bloody meat of the ferocious beasts lazily. They did not look like merchants, but looked more like space pirates than space pirates. They were all brimming with aggression, and the aura inside their bodies was extremely strong. They were all existences at the cosmic realm and the cosmic realm. Moreover, their auras all revealed a ruthless, bloodthirsty, and cruel intent. Only the figure in the center, surrounded by nearly 1,000 figures, was sitting in front of a big table like a gentleman, slowly tasting red wine while holding a knife and fork, cutting a large piece of ferocious beast meat on a plate. Although he was also eating it raw, and the bloody scene was extremely horrifying, this person's movements were extremely elegant, as if he was tasting a piece of top-grade beef. He gently cut off a small piece, put into his mouth with a fork, and chewed slowly. After swallowing, he nodded slightly in satisfaction, took a sip of red wine from a maid beside him, and continued cutting the meat. To the left and right of this gentleman-like, seductive man, there was a young woman of the human clan with a seductive figure and a beautiful appearance. Her clothes were extremely revealing, and they served him like maids. However, the cultivation of these two maids had clearly reached the first level of universe realm. This was simply shocking. This man actually had a cosmic realm expert as his maids. It should be known that these two maids were extremely young at first glance. Even the cosmic realm Tao child of the various races of the Federation of the Second Universe could not be compared to them. In fact, The nearly 1,000 figures in the top cabin were all extremely young. There were very few female cultivators, and most of them were strong men. Their cultivation was not weak, and the difference was that the cosmic realm experts were all at the cosmic realm. In the current 3 dimensions of the universe, there were probably only a very small number of races and forces that could possess so many prodigies of the younger generation at the cosmic light realm and above. This existence who was leisurely drinking red wine and tasting the bloody meat of the ferocious beasts was none other than the zombie king, Tuoba Linfeng. At this moment, the aura emanating from his cultivation had reached the peak of the 9th rank of the cosmic realm. He was only 1 step away from the Star-Lord state. Since he was there was no doubt as to the origin of these 1,000 figures in the top cabin of the small fortress. They were all zombie generals under the Zombie King's command. Not only had they developed self-awareness, becoming new zombie lives as if they had been reborn, but they had also evolved to a very high level and could already transform into human bodies, not revealing the slightest bit of zombie aura. Of course, if necessary, even the 2 beautiful women who were serving Tuoba Linfeng's meal could instantly transform into ferocious and terrifying cosmic zombies, just like the experts of the various races of the second universe who had activated their bloodline true forms. For them, this kind of zombie physique had indeed been formed, for a bloodline-like existence. What was even more strange was that although this small fortress with a diameter of 50,000 meters was sailing in the void, there was not a single person controlling the battleship in the command cabin on the top floor at this moment. There was not even the slightest hum of the kinetic energy cabin. It was as if this was not an interstellar battleship at all. Unfortunately, this happened to be the case. This small fortress was transformed from the fusion of 5 cosmic zombies with the metal attribute. In a sense, the product of the fusion of the 5 cosmic zombies could also be said to be a life fortress. However, it was completely incomparable to the life fortress in Yixian's hands. The difference could only be said to be like heaven and earth. This zombie fortress only had shape, although it had certain offensive capabilities and could evolve to continuously improve itself. It was completely incomparable to the perfect evolution of the world bugs that formed the life fortress. There was no comparison at all. Boss, a fleet has appeared in front of us. The scale is not bad. It seems to be a commercial fleet. Although there are only a dozen battleships, all of them are large and small fortresses. It was also at this moment that an enchanting maid next to Tuoba Linfeng suddenly spoke with a cruel smile on her face. She licked her lips and continued, "There must be a lot of fresh meat inside, and there must be experts. Hee, that's high-level meat. Boss, after swallowing this fleet, you should be able to break through the universe state and become a Star-Lord in one fell swoop, becoming a Star-Lord old monster and a zombie emperor." Chapter 3870. This fleet belonged to a top family in the Heavenly Wind Empire's capital, the Heavenly Wind Planet. Although there were only 12 warships in the fleet, they were all fortresses with a diameter of 50,000 meters and a diameter of 100,000 meters. 2 of them were battle fortresses, and the remaining 10 were commercial fortresses that only had a certain amount of offensive capabilities. The materials in the fleet were very important, and the quantity was huge. Therefore, the 2 almighties of the family were in charge of the fleet. This was not the first universe, where wars were frequent, nor was it the second universe, where space pirates were rampant. Although there were space pirates in the void of the third universe, at least they were not as rampant. The third universe had been unified by the human race, and the 2 camps each occupied half of the entire dimension. Therefore, although there were space pirates, they could not be rampant. It was enough to have 2 supreme beings in charge of the fleet. At this time, one of the 2 supreme beings had already discovered the small fortress that was slowly approaching in the void ahead. The small fortress was a commercial ship, so it did not arouse his vigilance. However, because the surface of this small fortress was slightly damaged, it was obvious that it had just been bombarded by the ship's cannons. It should have broken through the siege and escaped. Therefore, the Grand Expert still attracted a lot of attention, because it suggested that there might be a fairly powerful space pirate gang in the space ahead. Otherwise, such a small fortress with a diameter of 50,000 meters would not be in such a sorry state. Although it was a commercial ship, it was a small fortress after all, and it only had a certain combat capability. It was not something that ordinary star-level battleships could provoke. Despite their doubts, the order was quickly given. The entire fleet slowed down and headed towards the small fortress of merchant ships in the void ahead. The two sides approached each other very quickly. Right when the commercial fleet was about to send out a communication request and ask what had happened to the broken fortress, an unexpected change suddenly took place. Boom! A huge, thunderous explosion sounded, and the entire small fortress with a diameter of 50,000 meters suddenly exploded without any warning. There was no fire, but the small fortress disintegrated in the void and turned into 5 huge fortresses with a diameter of 10,000 meters, ferocious fortresses. It didn't look like a starry sky battleship at all. Instead, it looked more like a mixture of flesh and metal. Brandishing its sharp blades, it opened its bloody mouth and rushed straight up. The 5 huge monsters all exuded the aura of universe realm cultivation. Although they had just entered the universe realm, there were 5 of them after all, and their overall strength was extremely terrifying. Such a strange change instantly stunned all the powerhouses in the commercial fleet. They had never imagined such a scene, but it really happened in front of them at this moment. Everything was like a horror movie in space. But this was not all. As Xianxia's small fortress exploded, 5 ferocious monsters made of flesh and metal appeared. At the same time, nearly 1,000 figures fell out of Xianxia's small fortress and appeared in the void. They were all human cultivators, but they were actually transforming. Roar! The first to transform was a young human beauty with an extremely enchanting figure. As she raised her head and roared, her body instantly expanded, turning into a ferocious monster that was 10,000 feet tall. Her body was covered with tentacles, and some mucus was secreting from the small holes all over her body. It was too disgusting. It was simply a moving mountain of flesh full of tentacles and small holes, and this mountain of flesh was alive. What was even more strange was that there were invisible ripples spreading out from the countless tentacles of this mountain of flesh. In an instant, it shrouded the void, and more than 10 large and small strongholds were all shrouded in it. These invisible ripples were a unique biological frequency. Its function was to temporarily interrupt the communication in this corner of the void. The signal of the star network could no longer be transmitted. Then, from this disgusting mountain of flesh, an extremely pleasant voice of a human woman came out. "Boss, the control is successful. This corner of the void has been isolated, and the signal of the star network cannot be transmitted. We can start work now." Roar. Screech. Just as the pleasant-sounding human woman finished speaking, the nearly 1,000 figures in the void around her moved in unison. At this moment, furious roars shook the sky, and violent howls rang out continuously. The nearly 1,000 figures all began to transform, just like the Masters in the Federation of the Second Universe, who activated their bloodlines and revealed their bloodline true forms. The only difference was that the gigantic figures revealed by these 1,000 figures were not only strange, but all of them emitted a dense, evil aura. Some of them were even made of rotten flesh and blood, and they were constantly wriggling as if they wanted to devour everything. Among them, one of them even turned into a bone dragon that was hundreds of meters long. No, it was not a bone dragon, because there was still a lot of flesh and blood left on this dragon's body. However, it was all rotten and emitted a disgusting aura that was extremely evil. These guys were originally human corpses that had mutated into zombie life forms, but with the subsequent evolution, they had all taken different evolutionary paths. There was actually a guy who had the bloodline characteristics of a rotten corpse dragon. This was too shocking. All the masters in the merchant fleet ahead had long been so scared that they were trembling all over. At this moment, they finally understood what was going on. In horror and despair, cries of alarm rang out in an instant. Zombies! Universe zombies! Heavens, one of them has actually evolved to the level of a rotten corpse dragon. How long has this group of universe zombies been growing? They have clearly become a force to be reckoned with. Universe Almighties. Nearly a third of them are Universe Almighties, and the rest are all existences in the cosmic light realm. It's over, we're finished. It's not just us, the entire human race is finished. This universe zombie army has always existed and did not continue to wreak havoc on the planets. Instead, they rushed into the void of the universe and specifically devoured fleet after fleet. Do you see those 5 monsters that are a mixture of metal and flesh? They are clearly fighting continuously. They can even devour spaceships. No wonder there have been rumors that the third universe is not peaceful recently. Many merchant fleets have disappeared completely without a trace. Originally, they had all encountered this universe zombie army. Even the spaceships were devoured and digested. Heavens, this is too terrifying. It's over. The human race is finished. When the chaos started, no one was aware of it at all. In the face of an army of nearly 1,000 cosmic light realm and above zombies, including more than 300 universe almighties, the entire merchant fleet did not even have the desire to resist. Amidst the cries of alarm, some people chose to escape from the spaceships, while others directly chose to self-destruct. This was better than enduring the great horror of being devoured alive by the universe zombies while they were still alive. After half a day, the entire void regained its tranquility again. Chapter 3871. Roar. 9 transformations of the demonic ape. Third transformation. In the final change, Xianxia raised his head and roared. The blood and qi within the 3 true bodies surged endlessly. At first, it was like a roaring river, but then it turned into a boundless sea of rage. His body quickly expanded, reaching a height of 10,000 meters. In just a few breaths of time, Xianxia activated the Devil Ape True Body and directly activated the first 3 transformations of the Devil Ape, causing his true body to reach 100,000 feet in size. His cultivation had also increased by 3 small levels, and he had finally reached the first level of the Star-Lord realm. Xianxia had experienced the magnificent power of the Star-Lord state for the first time. It was quite an amazing feeling. He felt more intimate with the universe outside his body when he was in the universe state, and vaguely felt the traces of the laws of the universe. However, after he became a Star-Lord, not only was the feeling clearer, he even felt that he could manipulate the trajectories of the laws of the universe and use them for himself. Of course, it was very weak. However, it was of great significance for Xianxia. While he was a Star-Lord, Xianxia was confident that he could capture the heavenly eye without alarming the headless baby, even if the heavenly eye was observing everything in secret in the depths of the root of all evil. He could activate the interstellar jump ability and escape before the heavenly eye could find him. It meant that Xianxia was finally ready to enter the root of all evil again after his seclusion. He could take action at any time. However, in order to ensure that he had the strength of a Star-Lord, Xianxia could only use the true form of the 3-headed, 6-armed demon ape when he entered the source of all evil. Moreover, he had to maintain the 3rd transformation of the demon ape. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to guarantee his strength as a Star-Lord. He would be in a very passive position if anything happened. Activate the interstellar jump ability immediately and lock onto the destination, the root of all evil. Xianxia ended his seclusion with slight anxiety. He took a deep breath after making all the preparations, then issued an order to the absorption system in his body. An extremely feeble light flashed, and the true form of the demonic ape, which was still in the 3rd transformation of the demonic ape, suddenly disappeared. He had been worried that it would be inconvenient to use the interstellar jump ability in such a state. After all, Xianxia had always been in the shape of an ordinary human being when he used the system's ability. However, he was in the true form of a ferocious beast at the moment, which was definitely different. The system would have to bear a different burden when it activated the interstellar jump ability. Yixian was even a little worried that his interstellar coordinate jumping ability would be fundamentally affected by such a large and terrifying state, causing him to fail. But reality proved that all of this was just unnecessary worry. In the end, the interstellar coordinate jump ability was successfully activated. With a flash of light, Yixian's figure completely disappeared from where he stood. In the root of all evil, the origin of all evil. Today, the root of all evil star field no longer had the so-called outer region, central region buffer zone, or core hinterland. Previously, these three regions were separated by an array formation, but now, the three regions were unified. The array formation had disappeared, and they had become a vast star field. But even so, in this vast and boundless star domain, it was still deathly silent. Ever since the last great change, the entire star domain, the source of all evil, no longer had any living beings. Those that remained inside had all been thrown into the netherworld furnace by the heavenly eye. Outside this star field, no one, no matter which top force of the three dimensions or individual cultivators, dared to enter this star field. The root of all evil was originally known as the most dangerous star field in the first universe. Now, it had become the most dangerous star field in the three dimensions. Even Sector Lord-level ferocious beasts were killed instantly, and 2 of them at that. Was there anything more terrifying than this? Even if one had the guts to enter, they would not dare to enter easily. In fact, everyone was too worried. Currently, there was no danger in this star field that was the source of all evil. As early as the second day after that unforeseen event, the heavenly Tao's green eye had already left. Furthermore, it was a complete evacuation, not leaving behind a single trace of consciousness to secretly spy on this star domain, or rather, the netherworld furnace. Because that was completely unnecessary. This time, the netherworld furnace was not condensing some kind of object as the outside world experts, including Yixian, had guessed. It was just eating. It had never eaten before, and this was only the first time it was eating. The so-called eating was for the sake of evolution. Yes, the netherworld furnace was about to evolve. Everything that was swallowed into the netherworld furnace, including the corpses and flesh of countless starry sky experts from the three dimensions, the alloy wreckage of tens of millions of battleships, the corpses of millions of ferocious beasts, and the things that were originally treated as waste material, were spat out from the netherworld furnace. The remains of primordial creatures that were spat out, everything was just the nourishment that the netherworld furnace needed for its self-evolution. It was not a raw material for refining some kind of object, but merely nourishment for its own growth. After all these materials were thrown into the netherworld furnace, they were immediately crushed by the huge, ancient millstone in the central region of the furnace, and turned into a mixture of flesh and alloy. However, these materials were not condensed by the power of the netherworld furnace. They were stored in the central hole of the huge millstone in the netherworld furnace all along. From that moment on, the netherworld furnace that was accidentally activated became silent again. The rumbling sound of the millstone turning disappeared, as if the netherworld furnace had entered a dormant state again. This was indeed the case. After all the nourishment for evolution was ground into pulp, the netherworld furnace entered a special dormant state like a cultivator going into seclusion, and it had not ended until now. During this period of time, the special mixture of flesh and alloy in the central hole of the huge millstone in the furnace continued to decrease. It was like the sea level gradually drying up due to evaporation. Moreover, the originally huge amount of this special material was about to reach the bottom in the central hole of the netherworld furnace's millstone. There was only a thin layer left, and it would completely dry up at any time. Without a doubt, once it reached the bottom, this special mixture of flesh and alloy would be completely exhausted. The netherworld furnace would awaken again, and this evolution would also come to an end. Chapter 3872. Xiao. With a faint sound of breaking through the air, Yi Xian appeared in the third form of the ancient devil ape true body. When the three-headed, six-armed ancient devil ape appeared in the source of all evil star field, Yi Xian's heart was in his throat. At this moment, he was ready to escape immediately if the situation was not right. Even when the interstellar coordinate jump ability had just ended, the moment his figure appeared, he had already issued a system command and was ready to launch a second jump. However, the truth was that nothing had happened, which made him feel as if he had punched a cotton ball. What's going on? Yi Xian turned his head to look around, feeling dumbfounded. The entire source of all evil star field was dead silent, and there was no movement in the vast and boundless void, giving him the illusion that he had come to a dead zone. Not only did he not feel the slightest pressure related to the heavenly eye, even the netherworld furnace seemed to have fallen into a deep sleep again, silent. Could it be that the refining has been completed and the special product of the netherworld furnace has been taken away by the heavenly eye? The three pairs of giant eyes of the ancient devil ape flashed with a dark light, and, as he muttered to himself, there was a faint feeling of uneasiness in his heart. If that's the case, it means that this young master is one step too late. And if the product of the netherworld furnace has been taken away this time, it means that this item is of great use to the eye of the heavenly Tao. The special refining this time is not a coincidence, but premeditated. Unfortunately, I'm still one step too late. Otherwise, as long as I came before that condensed product was taken away, even if I just took a look at it from a distance, I would at least know what it is. With this, I can more or less deduce some information. As he muttered to himself, a look of regret appeared on the face of the ancient devil ape. Then, Yi Xian seemed to have thought of something, and after hiding his figure, he circled around the core area of the source of all evil. After confirming that the heavenly eye did not leave any perception, he directly dispelled it. He got rid of the ancient devil ape's bloodline true body state. Returning to his human form, his cultivation base also recovered to the 14th level, the 5th level of the cosmic realm. Since the eye of the heavens was not here, there was no need to maintain the ancient demon ape third transformation at all times. It was simply too large, and even if he used his concealment technique, it would be quite difficult and inconvenient. Now that he had returned to his human form, Yi Xian felt much more relaxed. He immediately activated his mental power secret technique, perfect oscillation, and completely concealed his body and aura. Then, he flew towards the netherworld furnace. Although the heavenly Tao's green, I had already left with the unexpected product of the netherworld furnace, and Yi Xian had lost the opportunity to see what the netherworld furnace had condensed this time. He was still unwilling to give up. He decided to go deep into the netherworld furnace and explore it. Perhaps he would be able to find some clues and deduce some information from it. Yi Xian had given up a drop of true blood of the demon ape to the netherworld cauldron and received its protection. In the star field of the source of all evil, he was unaffected by the pressure of the netherworld cauldron, just like all the other native vicious beasts. But that could only be achieved when he was in his true form of the three-headed, six-armed demon ape. But now, he was in his human form and had not activated the true blood of the demon ape in his body, so he still did not feel the slightest bit of pressure. This was very unusual, and it made Yi Xian feel a rush of excitement. He felt that perhaps he could directly enter the interior of the netherworld furnace. His guess was right. The netherworld furnace was now in the final stage of its evolution, and all its functions were suspended. Not a single trace of pressure was emitted from it. Normally, even the native vicious beasts protected by the netherworld furnace could only get close to the edge of the netherworld furnace and could not enter the interior of the netherworld furnace at all. But now, all this was not a problem, but this was also temporary. Once the netherworld furnace completed this evolution and fully awakened from this dormant state, the original pressure of the netherworld furnace would be released again, and it would be even more terrifying. Therefore, in a sense, Yi Xian's arrival this time was really extremely coincidental. If he was half a day later, he would not be able to enter the netherworld furnace smoothly, unless he was protected by the headless baby corpse like the first time he arrived. Soon, Xian, who had activated the spiritual power secret technique perfectly, leaped up and crossed the mouth of the netherworld furnace. Then, he landed and entered the netherworld furnace with ease. The whole netherworld furnace was as silent as death. There was not the slightest sensation, and there was not the slightest movement. Xian's eyes swept through the interior of the netherworld furnace, and soon he had a panoramic view of everything. All the other areas were as usual, and there was no difference at all. Only in the central void of the central region of the millstone, there was a thin layer of substance, which looked like a mixture of flesh and alloy. It should be the remains of the starry sky experts, native vicious beasts, and the remains of the battleships that had been sucked into the netherworld furnace before. It was the mixture after the remains were crushed by the millstone. What was strange was that this thin layer of mixture seemed to be being absorbed at this moment, and was still slowly decreasing. It was likely that in another 2 hours or so, it would completely disappear. No, the situation is a bit abnormal. Xian's eyes flashed, and he immediately realized that something was wrong. He whispered softly, "These mixed substances are slowly being consumed." It seems that this time, the netherworld furnace is not carrying out any unplanned condensation, but absorbing and evolving. Holy sh*T. It can't be. Those mixed substances formed by the remains of countless starry sky experts, native vicious beasts, ancient creatures, and millions of battleships are actually being absorbed by the netherworld furnace to help it evolve? This is very likely. The netherworld furnace was originally made of a special kind of rare treasure metal, so it is understandable that it can absorb the remains of millions of battleships. Compared with the material of the netherworld furnace itself, the so-called universal alloy that was used to build these battleships is probably just a low-grade metal. If this is the case, doesn't it mean that the power of the netherworld furnace will be even more powerful after the time transformation is completed? What is the heavens green I trying to do? Let this netherworld furnace evolve again and give birth to self-consciousness, just like giving birth to an artifact spirit. This is the rhythm of turning into a spirit. Muttering to himself, Xian's expression kept changing. Although all this was just his guess from the current situation, this guess should be the truth. While muttering, his eyes drifted away and once again swept towards the central void of the millstone. At this time, the originally thin layer of mixture had already revealed a corner of the millstone's void. Chapter 3873. The netherworld furnace was about to awaken, and Xian was alarmed. This was because the netherworld furnace had evolved this time, and its power would definitely be stronger. Xian did not think that he could withstand it. Although he could use the Shinnon cauldron to protect himself, he was currently inside the netherworld furnace. This heavy artifact was of the same grade as the Shinnon cauldron. Now that it had evolved, the Shinnon cauldron should be able to protect Xian, but it might not be able to break through space and escape. If the heavenly Tao I was alerted during this period of time, it would be troublesome. Thinking of this, Xian became anxious. He wanted to immediately soar up and rush out of the netherworld furnace. Walala! It was also at this moment that the dense sounds of chains suddenly erupted. All of the rune chains inside